got loyalty, got royalty inside my DNA. I got killer beats, got war and peace inside my DNA. I got poison, pain, and joy inside my DNA.
Hello and welcome back to my channel The Bleach Fanfiction. Join us as we explore the world of fanfiction and fantasy and bring you the best story and discussions. This is the first part of What If Ichigo Time Travel by iamAdisco. So give this video a like and subscribe for more videos in future. So let's get into the fanfic. Zanpakuto's speech will be in cursive. The horns of war were broken. The fake Karakura town was turned into rubble. Soul Society was demolished. Everything was destroyed. The culprit of all this was on his knees in front of the supposed protector, coughing up blood. The orange-haired protector stood in front of him, staring impassively at the despicable man. The man coughed again, a lot more vigorously. "You'd have lost, Kurosaki Ichigo," the man with a broken body forced out. "I may be dying, but it is you who truly lost." Aizen mocked. "Your family and friends are all dead. But you knew that, didn't you, Ichigo-kun? After all, you were there when they died, not being able to do anything while I killed them. Did you know, before you came to see them take their last breaths, I had the opportunity of listening to the music of their screams. Your blonde sister, what was her name? Ah, Yuzu. Did you know how she screamed when I had my way with her while your father and other sister watched?" It was Aizen's tirade was cut short as Ichigo finally freed the three worlds from his presence by beheading him. "Shut up, you vile fucker," I said. "Shut up." Ichigo shouted. "I think he's incapable of speaking as of now," came from a haggard voice behind Ichigo. The orange-haired man turned around fast enough to get whiplash. "Kisuke? Are you alive? You're hurt. Come on, let's get you to the 4th division. Don't you dare faint now," Ichigo said frantically. I am sorry, Ichi-chan, but I am afraid that my time is up." "Here, take this," the shopkeeper replied weakly while shoving a small box into Ichigo's hands. "Don't be stupid, and don't call me that. What is TYF? Is it glowing?" "Kisuke? Kisuke," the hybrid exclaimed. "Sorry, Ichi-chan, for making you do this. But I am too weak to relive this life. And too weak to deal with Aizen-san. I am sorry for doing this to you, I truly am. But you are the only one who can do this. Fix this, Ichigo, and hopefully you'll be able to live happily ever after," the scientist said. "What the F are you saying? Kisuke? Kisuke? Oh, F dash." Ichigo shouted once again. Around him the world was whirling. Kisuke was long gone, and Ichigo was seeing several scenes playing out, but they were all too fast to comprehend. Finally, he began to notice that the box was seeping his Ryatsu, and even though he wanted to let it go, he could not. The orange-haired man, whose Ryatsu hadn't been that drained even after a month of starvation at the hands of Aizen while he was under his TLC, was surprised to find himself losing consciousness. But he didn't fight against it. Instead, he welcomed the blackness. After all, he was so tired. An infinite amount of time later. "Hey, Kingsley. Wake up." The orange-haired man twitched. "Hey, wake the F up." Ichigo's Zanpakuto/Hollow Shiro, Zanpaholo, shouted from inside his mind. Ichigo just twitched again. Shiro sighed, annoyed with his wielder. Beside him, Ichigo's manifestation of his Quincy powers, Yawatch, shoved his fingers in his ears, which proved to be wise as Shiro began to scream bloody murder. "Hui, Kingsley, wake up, YAF lazy but moanin' beach." This time Ichigo just grumbled a low, "Shut up," and continued to sleep. At this point, Shiro looked like someone had just told him pizza was the worst thing ever, i.e. completely baffled and scandalized, and Yawatch was trying, unsuccessfully, not to laugh at this particular expression. Shiro turned to Yawatch with fire in his eyes. "I can't believe it. The idiot lands himself in a sheet load of trouble, which is nothing new, by the courtesy of Kisuke Urahara, which is again, nothing new, and all he does is sleep, he hollow exclaimed. Yawatch looked amused, but decided that yes, it was time to wake their wielder he sighed, and after mumbling something about unruly kids he said. I will wake Ichigo up. No need to be so angry, Shiro. Oh, yeah. You know he sleeps like a log when he has the chance to. Shiro replied with a skeptical expression. Yawatch's eyes darkened a little at the reminder of their wielder hardships, and Shiro clenched his fists. After a long pause, Yawatch finally said, that may be true, but now is not the time to think about that. It seems like Urahara did something good for once. We are back in the past, and we have a chance to stop Aizen before he becomes that thing. Shiro was quiet for a while before he spoke. You're right, as usual. Wake him, oh, professional alarm clock. Yawatch twitched at the insult before he sent his wake-up call to Ichigo. Ichigo, Captain Shunsui is here. The reaction from Ichigo was immediate. Huh, Shunsui. Where, what, why, how, and old man, I hate you. Meanwhile, Shiro was laughing his butt off. That was the key. Oh, man, I'm going to have so much fun with this. Ichigo scowled and grudgingly asked the two of them. Yeah, laugh it off, would ya? Anyway, old man, where the F are we, what the F is happening and why in the seven hells am I laying on a futon? Both of the spirits paused. Kingsley, what is the last thing you remember? The famous scowl was back. What do you mean, what do I remember? The last thing I remember is Kisuke shoving a box to me, and rambling about second chances. Oh, please tell me he didn't. He did. He sent you back in time, Kingsley, Shiro replied very, helpfully. Ichigo groaned. A trip back in time. Now what, get a bushy. Somewhere else, a young Captain Kisuke Urahara sneezed. So, you're telling me that I have somehow traveled back in time, courtesy of my last living friend, and am now laying on some stranger's futon? Ichigo inquired disbelievingly from his inner spirits. Yeah, King. Was Shiro's oh so eloquent answer. Ichigo groaned in frustration. Great. Absolutely great. Thanks Kisuke, for making me do this. The hybrid griped. Shiro and Yawatch were quiet. Ichigo sighed loudly and hid his face in his hands. He wanted it to end already. 15 long years of fighting had taken their toll on the orange-haired man. For him, it was extremely difficult to accept that he had to live through sheet all over again. Inside his mind, Shiro scoffed, annoyed by his wielder's attitude, and even though Yawatch sent him a warning glance, he began to, for lack of a better word, reprimand Ichigo. Yo, King! I thought you were better than this. Don't you dare sit and sulk around. Shiro yelled. Ichigo, who had not expected the violent outburst, made a sudden movement, and knocked over a ceramic jug, which had apparently been placed there by the mysterious host. Suddenly, there was patter of footsteps hurrying towards Ichigo. The hybrid's eyes widened when the shoji doors were opened by someone who could only be his twin. In turn, the apparent twin of Ichigo began frantically to ask questions at such a rapid pace that Shiro felt compelled to offer him a place in the rapping industry. Are you awake? Of course you are, but who are you, where are from, why do you look like me if I had long orange hair? I am Shiba Kyan, by the way, the head of the Shiba clan. Could it be that you are a long-lost relative we did not know about? And why do you have a Zanpakuto? I checked the academy records, and there were not any mentions of you, and the twin who was now identified as Shiba Kyan, Ichigo's cousin, was suddenly cut off his rant by someone smacking him on the head with a frying pan. Really, Nii-san, you should give the guy a breather before you bombard him with questions. He only woke up, came the scolding voice of the Kyan's abuser, who Ichigo had identified as his other cousin, Shiba Kukaku. Kukaku now turned her gaze towards Ichigo, and began apologizing for her elder brother's behavior. Sorry about that, he has been so hyped up on finding out about you. I will get someone to bring you some soup. Get up, you idiot brother, she stated while dragging Kyan out the door. Ichigo, whose mind had short-circuited when he saw his long-dead cousins, suddenly decided that something needed to be stated. The warrior stated, quite eloquently. Yawatch sighed. It seems like we need to find a suitable explanation for your existence, Ichigo, the old man said in obvious exasperation. Ichigo scowled at the subtle jab at his inability to adapt to the situation, but did as told. Yeah. Let's see, we can't tell them I am from a possible future ridden with 3 consecutive wars, obviously. From now on, I am Shiba Ichigo, from the 75th Rokon district. My father was a Shiba, and on his deathbed told me about the extended clan since my mother died several years ago. When I was traveling here, I was attacked by some thugs who wanted my Zanpakuto. And since we are on this matter, let's say I got my sword from a dying Shinigami, don't know his name. Did you just come up with that bullshit story? Shiro sounded impressed despite himself. Ichigo smirked, but it was tinted with bitterness. Yeah, 15 years of wars do give a person the experience to bullshit their way through anything. By the way, did I miss anything? The answers from his spirits were negative, and the orange-haired fellow now waited on the arrival of the promised soup, which he could smell from his futon. When the last time I had a real meal? 4 years ago. Yeah, 4 years ago on Karen and Yuzu's last birthday before they were killed. Oh, why did I think of that? The warrior rubbed his face in frustration as the memories of Aizen's words and the twins' mangled bodies came to mind. Suddenly Ichigo didn't feel so hungry anymore. Oh, King. The BSTRD will never have the chance to do that to our sisters again. We'll kill him before he even looks at them, that is a vow I take. Now, eat, there is a girl who is standing in front of you with food. Shiro's comments brought the war veteran out of his depressing thoughts to confront the female servant who had bought him food. Thank you, miss, what is your name? He told her after he finished eating. The girl's eyes widened. Wayuki, she stuttered out. Ichigo nodded, and repeated his thanks this time with the girl's name. The poor girl who had never been asked anything personal, blushed and almost ran out of the room, which left Ichigo quite perplexed. Was it something I did? He queried. In response Shiro just laughed. Zanpakuto speech. So, you're telling me that you look like me because we are related? Shiba Kyan repeated Ichigo's words after he had finished giving him an account of his bullshit story. Ichigo nodded hesitantly, not sure of how his cousin would react. Well then, welcome to the family. I have to induct you immediately as my brother, since you do not really have any proof that you are a Shiba beside your looks, but your story sounds plausible enough. I think I remember some uncle of ours going missing in the Rukongai some years ago. Ichigo blinked. Was this really all he had to do? Moreover, did he say brother? He hesitated once again before he answered. Thank you. Nevertheless, why would you want to induct me as your brother? And don't you have to consult your elders before you do something like this? He asked. He could not understand why Kyan would want a literal stranger he just met as his brother. Sure, they looked alike, but that was it. Kyan seemed a little torn before he sighed and answered Ichigo's query. Look, know that we don't really know each other, but the reality of the matter is that the clan needs an heir, and since I have no, eligible brothers or children, the nearest heir is a BSTRD of a man that I don't trust. Moreover, the reason I am choosing you is very simple. You might have experienced it sometimes, which is probable if your Ryatsu is anything to go by, but the Shibas have a special hidden power, the power to read hearts. Kyan took a deep breath and looked at Ichigo who had gone white as a sheet, and gave him a wry smile. Do not panic. It's not like reading minds, but rather we get an inkling of whether the person is trustworthy or not, and from you I got a strong feeling of belonging from you. It confused me, 'cause you felt like someone I could tell my deepest darkest secrets to, and you weren't even conscious." The Shiba clan head looked amazed and disbelieved at the same time. On the other hand, Ichigo felt rather uncomfortable, so he cleared his throat, bringing Kaien's attention back to him. The orange-haired male had his scowl in place, and looked rather torn. I'm not too sure about this, but the hybrid scratched his head in frustration. He wanted to accept the offer, but wouldn't it be too greedy of him? He just said, quite frankly. "It's a good proposition, but I don't want to be a burden." Kaien blinked, and then grinned widely. "I'll take that as an agreement. And don't be daft, you won't be a burden. Now, tell me, have you ever heard of Shinoyu Academy?" Ichigo, who was quite perplexed, decided just to go with the flow, and nodded. 2 days later, Shinoyu Academy. It looked like fate was favoring the Shiba. It truly was a lucky coincidence that the entrance exams for the academy were 2 days after the newest Shiba and heir of said clan was awake. Ichigo and Kaien were now in the waiting room for Ichigo's results. Kaien shot a look in his brother's direction, observing how he was acting. During the 2 days he had spent with Ichigo, he had gotten to know that the orange-haired twin of his didn't normally smile, and always had a frown on his face, which deteriorated into a scowl when he was irritated. The man didn't act like a normal Shiba, though he didn't have a stick-up but like the Kachikis, thankfully. Beside that, it was a certain grace to his movements, much like the late Kenichi Shihuin, former captain of Squad 2 had had. It was like his baby brother had some training in the field of Shinigami, which was likely as the missing Shiba had been a promising young Shinigami before he went off to wherever. Kaien frowned. If he remembered correctly, the missing Shiba had gone AWOL around 35 years ago. That meant that his new baby brother was younger than some of the children in the clan, which was unbelievable. So Kaien decided to ask his brother quite about his age there and then. "Say, Ichigo, what is your age?" "HM. "Oh, around 31, I guess," was the distracted answer from the orange-haired man. Kaien blinked. And blinked again. And opened and closed his mouth like he was imitating a goldfish. Ichigo, who had shifted his attention from whatever he was thinking, was now looking quite alarmed. Is everything okay, Kaien?" 31 years. Kaien said faintly. He couldn't believe it. The youngest Shinigami graduate ever had been. It was truly an act of fate that Ichigo was UST over the academy age limit. Kaien shook his head in disbelief. It looked like the clan's liquor storage was going to be in danger if this kept up. The elder Shiba's train of thought was derailed as right then an academy instructor shouted for Shiba, Ichigo, to come forward and receive his results. The two Shibas hurried off to the room where the academy instructors were waiting with Ichigo's results. "Ah! Kaien! How nice of you to accompany your..." Gengoro Onabera trailed off, waiting for Kaien to explain their obvious relation. Kaien began to rattle off like a mother showing off. "This is my brother and the heir to the Shiba clan. He is only 31, and I only let him take the exam partly because I didn't know he was that young and partly because, well, you can tell by his monstrous Ryatsu that he needs some training. Please take care of him." Gengoro raised his eyebrows, while Ichigo scowled lightly. It seemed like Ryatsu control was a sore topic for him. "Only 31. That means you are going to break another academy record." "Fear not, Kaien, it seems like your brother can take care of himself. You broke every exam record in the millennia-long history of our academy. Your Ryatsu measured to level 10, a weak captain or a strong vice-captain. Your Hakuda and Ho-Ho were probably on par with some of the Onmitsukido, and your Zenjutsu was definitely over academy level. As for the written part, you got a full 100%, and though your Kidu was ordinary on the lower numbers, it was absolutely splendid on the higher numbers." Gengoro stopped to take a breath, and for the Shibas to let it sink in. Kaien looked like he was on the verge of fainting and was already hyperventilating, while Ichigo looked mildly surprised, though it was hard to tell with his frown. Gengoro sighed and continued. You could, essentially, graduate today. But since we have to keep up appearances, Ichigo has to remain a year in the academy. Else will you be accused of favoritism, and the Shibas would certainly be accused of using their influence. You don't need to attend any classes, and your classes would be with the 6th years anyway. When the captains get to know of you, they will probably send for you to go on missions and evaluate you themselves. Is that your Zanpakuto? Ichigo nodded. Kyan was now leaning on him for support, muttering something about sake and empty storages. Have you achieved Shirkai? Jengoro asked, blatantly ignoring Kyan's hitched breathing. Ichigo nodded again. That seemed to be too much for Kyan, as he dropped on the floor like a sack of potatoes in a dead faint. Ichigo prodded him lightly with his foot, looking mildly concerned. Jengoro coughed, hiding a laugh, though he was a little concerned for Kyan's health, but after 5 minutes of waiting for the Fukutechu to wake up, he decided to wrap it up. So, welcome to the 6th year at Shinoyu Academy. You're free to go wherever whenever. I would like for you to stay at the academy for the school year and show off, to convince the other students that all this wasn't a fluke. A request, not an order, I assure you. See you hopefully on the 22nd of August, in a week. Now, please make sure that Kyan doesn't drink himself into a stupor. Ichigo once again nodded, while hiking his brother up on his shoulders. I'll make sure to come, the orange-haired man said. At that exact moment, Kyan decided to in his sleep, making Ichigo freeze up. Ichigo dearly hoped S wasn't a woman. Saw. Ichigo's mind was racing, and his face was red from embarrassment. Meanwhile Jengoro and the other instructors were struggling not to laugh at the apparent prodigy's predicament. Kyan continued to like a beach in heat. Oh, my sweet, sweet. That's it. Ichigo was going to murder Kyan, revive him and murder him again. The instructors had now given up all pretense, and were now openly laughing at the strawberry. Sake. Ichigo almost face-planted. Kyan was so dead that the Soul King wouldn't be able to revive him, he fumed. In his mind, Shiro cackled, and to his utmost horror, even Yawach chuckled. He was running. His heart was in his mouth, and he was almost hyperventilating. He was sweating so much that his Unifo 5RM was getting soaked. The Shiba clan head was panicking as the presence behind him closed in on him. The brunette looked frantically around for places to hide, to disappear, anything to get away from the presence that was now emitting so much killing intent that the prodigious Fukutechu was beginning to suffocate. He cast a panicked glance behind him. He then observed something that was quite a common sight in Siriidii on weekends. The captain of Squad 5, 8 and 13 walking along to wherever. The panicked man cried in relief. Yukitake Taishu. Please save me. Kyan shouted as he quickly hid behind his, terminally ill, Taicho. The captains all blinked, exchanging confused glances with each other. What are you hiding from, Kyan? For that matter, why are you hiding? You didn't PSS off Kakaku-san, did ya? The captain of Squad 5, Hirako Shinji asked the terrified man. Kyan shook his head. Not Kakaku, Captain Hirako, someone much more dangerous. The Fukutechu's explanation was cut short as an apparent twin of his, but with waist-length orange hair appeared in front of the three captains, with his sizable Zanpakuto drawn. Kyan yelped in fright, begging his Taicho to save him. The twin of the frightened man scowled, an expression that oddly seemed to fit him, in the united opinion of the captains. The man seemed to be making towards retrieving the cowering mess known to the world as Kyan Shiba, but Kyoraku Shunsui, captain of Squad 8 picked that moment to take pity on the poor man, and intervened. Ma, why don't you introduce yourself to us before you molest our dear Kyan-chan, the lazy-mannered man said, insulting both of the Shibas in a single query. Kyan didn't know whether to be horrified or grateful, so he settled for constipation, while Ichigo's mind decided that moment to lose control over his mouth. I am Shiba Ichigo, heir apparent to the Shiba clan. I don't want to molest this idiot, I want to skewer him, you lazy, drunk, fashion disaster, the orange-haired man shouted in Shunsui's shocked face. The stunned silence that followed was broken by Shinji's cackling and Yukate's chuckles. Shunsui just had a stunned look on his, telling the world what he thought of being talked to like that. Meanwhile, Ichigo was mentally beating himself up. He had forgotten that his mentor Shunsui was long lost, and that this was a lot younger and less calm version of the man that would eventually be Captain Commander. Also the fact that you could insult Shunsui's lazy attitude to the moon and back, and his drinking habits to the sun, but you never, ever. Did you just insult my incredible, awesome, amazing, extraordinary fashion sense, the calmest captain of the Godei 13 said angrily, hands going towards his Zanpakutus. Ichigo maintained a scowling facade, but mentally winced. The Shiba heir's mind was racing. In the end he decided to just go with the flow, as he was confident in his ability to handle Shunsui, if it came down to it. After all, sparring for 2 months straight makes one familiar with the opponent, and this Shunsui hadn't done that. Yet, anyways, the orange-haired man thought morosely. On the outside, he reinforced his scowl. Besides, Ichigo took much pride in the fact that he was the only one who made Shunsui lose his cool. He knew that they were more alike than people thought, which was why they had become such good friends during the wars. Ichigo knew that the lazy man often hid his scowls behind lazy smirks, and Shunsui had known that Ichigo hid his rare smiles behind scowls. Ichigo took a deep breath. Yeah, I insulted your fashion sense. Who the F wears a pink kimono with a straw hat anyways? With your complexion, a simple blue kimono would have done the trick, and get rid of that horrid hat. Who are you anyway? Don't look at me like that, Kyan. I had 2 sisters, and a seamstress as a mother. You can't not know about fashion if you have to survive in such a household. Now come out from your hiding place, I still have to kill you. Ichigo mentally patted himself on the back. Shunsui seemed to have developed an eye twitch as Shinji howled with laughter, and Kyan groaned, his momentary relief gone. Why you little, Shunsui's rant was cut off as Yukatake coughed lightly. We are right outside my squad's quarters. Why don't we have some tea as we work this out as adults, the white-haired man suggested. Both Ichigo and Shunsui scowled and tched in perfect synchronization, causing Shinji another fit of laughter. Kyan released a sigh of relief. Finally, he was free from the demon that was Ichigo's wrath, though he thought that this was only a tip of the iceberg. Kyan wondered why his brother was after him in the first place. He had only finished breakfast, when Ichigo appeared out of nowhere and began yelling various threats. It would have been funny, but the sheer killing intent his baby brother was on par with a Minos Grande. Once they were all comfortably seated in the squad quarters, Yukatake began to ask the question that was on everybody's mind. So, Kyan, I didn't know you had a brother like Ichigo here. Would you mind explaining? And why was he chasing you all over Suriidii? Kyan scratched his head, expression sheepish. Ah, that's because Ichigo was only adopted a few days ago. He was born to a runaway Shiba in Rukon, you see. But because his family was killed a year ago, by a Minos. He decided to find the rest of the clan, as per his father's wishes. As for his reason to hunting me, well, ask him. Kyan ended his explanation by pointing a finger in Ichigo's general direction. The captains now turned their heads towards the orange head, though Shunsui was still glaring. Ichigo glared disbelievingly at Kyan for a full minute, before he ducked his head and mumbled something, cheeks slightly flushed in embarrassment. What was that? I didn't quite catch it. Yukatake said hesitantly. Ichigo groaned and glared at Kyan with such force that the man flinched. I said that he embarrassed me. After hearing the results to my entrance exams, he fainted and began miming like a beach in heat while I was piggybacking him, about sake of all things. I thought I was going to die of embarrassment, but after Onabara began laughing I decided that older brother or not, he needs to die, the irritated Shiba yelled. There was stunned silence for all of 3 minutes before Kyan let his head fall down on his desk with a resounding thud, and Shinji and Shunsui erupted into howling raucous laughter. Ichigo turned so red he could pass as a living human-shaped strawberry, while Yukitake was sending the poor boy a sympathetic smile, before he uncharacteristically frowned, which caused the laughter to subside, though both Shunsui and Shinji were sporting smirks. You said that Kyan fainted after hearing your results. They couldn't be bad, if your Ryatsu is anything to go by. Why did you faint, Fukutechu Shiba? Kyan winced a little at the formal address, but stuck out his chest like a proud mother hen. Oh, Yukitake Taishu. You wouldn't believe what kind of praise my cousin was reined in from Onabara. You see, my baby brother broke every record of the academy. He was so good, that the shitty Onabara said that he could probably become a full-fledged Shinigami today. My baby brother already has Shirkai. But unfortunately he has to attend a year at the academy, because people would think that Clan pulled some strings to get him out of the academy, so he has to attend classes with the advanced 6th years. And the most amazing thing about him is that he is only 31. Kyan yelled out with such pride that Ichigo was embarrassed further. The captains present were all once again left stunned to silence, and both Yukitake and Shinji sent impressed looks towards the embarrassed angry mess that was Ichigo. As for Shunsui, he blinked twice in surprise, before he snorted derisively. So the barking dog has some bite. Well, infant, if you think that achieving Shirkai is impressive, then you got another thing coming, the captain of the 8th squad sneered, despite being impressed by Ichigo's numerous achievements. If possible, Ichigo looked more mutinous than ever. That's it. I know Shunsui was going to be less mature, but the nutjob's being downright arrogant. He needs to be taken down a peg or 1,000, the newest prodigy of the Shiba clan fumed. Shut up, you drunk. Who are you anyway? Ichigo yelled in Shunsui's face, baiting him. The famous captain blinked, jaw dropping to the ground in disbelief. Yukitake intervened once again, sensing the inevitable blow-up. Ah, Ichigo-kun, my bad, I forgot to introduce my friends and myself. My name is Yukitake Jushiro, captain of Squad 13, and your brother's superior. This man who has been laughing non-stop is Hirako Shinji, captain of Squad 5, and lastly this is Kuraku Shunsui, captain of Squad 8, the now identified captain of the 13th squad told Ichigo. Ichigo gave Yukitake a respectful nod, and a less respectful nod to Shinji, before he turned to Shunsui with a mental smirk, and a look of disbelief painted on his face. This drunk is a captain. Can he even hold a sword? I bet he hasn't ever seen a hollow, the orange-haired prodigy sneered, making the calmest captain of the Godii 13 lose his cool for real. Oh, yeah. Well, come out in the training ground. I'll show you how I cut down 1,000 hollows for my captain's test. Kyan, I don't care if he is an infant, and your brother. This kid is going down. Shunsui bellowed on top of his lungs, releasing a huge amount of Ryatsu and frightening a lot of the lower-ranking Shinigami in the whole of Siriidii. The enraged man stomped out of the 13th captain's office, heading for the training grounds which he knew were designed to contain Bankais. Yukitake sighed, knowing that Shunsui was on a warpath, and it was beyond even the Soul King to stop the enraged man. Shinji had a look of wary amusement and excitement on his face. The captain hadn't seen a good fight in ages, and he was rooting for the prodigy and the captain to get the steam out of their system. Kyan just looked horrified, while Ichigo, who was inwardly cackling along with Shiro, scowled outwardly, trailing after the future captain commander. Section 2 hours later. Shunsui was frustrated. 2 hours into the sparring match and neither of the opponents seemed to be falling down anytime soon. The dual-blade wielder had been forced to draw both his blades, despite his opponent only wielding one blade, though it was monstrously big, looking like an overgrown kitchen knife. The captain of the 8th was covered in small cuts and bruises, while his opponent looked no worse for wear. Shunsui gritted his teeth, and made up his mind. He was going to release his Shirkai. It was embarrassing enough that this infant Shiba was seemingly defeating him in his unreleased state, but there was no way Kyoraku was letting himself go down that easily. He took a deep breath. "Alright, infant. It seems like you have some bite to your bark, which has forced me to consider releasing my Shirkai. Behold. Flower wind rage and flower god roar. Heavenly wind rage and heavenly wind sneer. Kaiden Kayakatsu." The force of Shuansui's release almost broke the barrier which was designed to hold in any Bankai. Ichigo smirked. Finally the old man was taking him seriously. Well, he had to just match up, wouldn't he? "Is that all you can do, old man?" "Well, looks like I have to release my Zanpakuto as well." Shuansui's eyes widened. He thought that the brat was already released. An immense spiritual pressure emerged from Ichigo, nearly choking all the Shinigami who had come to the training arena to watch what was already dubbed the fight of the century. Kaien was into minds. He was horrified and somewhat amazed that his brother had somehow irked Shunsui. On the other hand, he was proud of the fact that Ichigo was pushing Shunsui to actually do something. There had been at least 5 centuries since the lazy man had come to a training arena. He was sure that this fight would push the man to realize that slacking off wasn't doing him any good. Maybe Lisa-chan would send a thank you gift to Ichigo for kicking Shuansui's butt in gear. Tear the heavens asunder. Zangetsu. This time the weakened barrier did break, leaving the whole of Siriidii to feel the immense pressure of the combined Ryatsu of both Ichigo and Shunsui. In his office, the captain commander, one Yamamoto Shingekuni Genryusai snapped his head up, and gave a small smirk. It looked like Shunsui just met his match. Meanwhile, Shunsui was regretting his decision to fight wholeheartedly. He was going to take a nap this afternoon, but it looked like this menace was going to keep him occupied. The captain was debating ways to get out of this mess. He looked at his opponent and blinked in surprise. It looked like the little bugger was a dual wielder. A two-big kitchen knife in one hand, and a trench knife in the other, with an all-black outfit, the boy looked like the definition of death god. Suddenly there were 2 very sharp blades at his throat. The orange-haired menace had the gall to smirk. Yield. Ichigo knew that for some reason, his former future mentor was dependent on his afternoon nap. So he very deliberately used a combination of Sonido and Shuanpa to get there and catch the captain by surprise, knowing that only an apocalypse would keep the man from yielding and sacrificing his nap. Ah, yes. Let's just go. It was getting boring anyway. Say, Ichi-chan, mind considering the 8th for your home after your graduation? While Ichigo was yelling at Shunsui for butchering his name, the anticlimactic ending to the fight surprised, and disappointed many of the assembled Shinigami. Kaien just breathed a sigh of relief as he and Yukitake made their way to the middle of the training ground, where Shunsui was back to having a lazy smile, and Ichigo was back to sporting a frown. Amazing, Ichigo. No wonder the shitty geezer Onabara was so impressed. Oh, and Captain Hiroko had to go, squad work. Kaien explained to Ichigo. Yukitake was about to say something when he was overcome with a coughing fit. Captain, are you okay? Do you need me to take you the 4th? The Shiba clan head was frantic, trying to help the sickly captain. Ah, Kaien, I'm just fine, just a small fit this time. Kaien scowled at Yukitake's remark about his health, which caused both Yukitake and Shunsui to blink at the similarity between Kaien and Ichigo. Meanwhile, Ichigo was debating how to tell Yukitake that the living world had developed a cure for his disease, commonly known as tuberculosis, and, just go with the flow peeps. That sounds like a terrible cough. I think you might have tuberculosis, the orange-haired said bluntly, causing 3 heads to swivel in his direction. Tuberculosis, you say? What is that? Yukitake asked curiously. Well, my mom was apparently a doctor when she was alive, and her high spiritual pressure allowed her to remember most of her life. She taught me a lot about the medical science, and how to spot different diseases. Tuberculosis is a lung disease, which can be treated and cured in the human world. I think you might have died with the disease when you were alive, and it lingered in your spirit. Ichigo explained to his wide-eyed audience. In his mind Shiro was giving him a standing ovation. Really? A cure? Yukitake sounded hopeful. Ichigo nodded. It might take a few months. Ichigo was interrupted by, surprisingly, Shunsui. Juchan can be cured for the disease he's had for centuries and months. Well, young Ichigo, it seems like you have something between your ears, and because you told of such an option, I will let your remarks about my fashion sense go. Now, let's go to Yamaji. The eccentric man then grabbed Ichigo's hand while he shunpoed towards the first division quarters, ignoring the prodigy's protests while leaving a bemused Yukitake and Kaien to follow them. Shirnu Academy, 2 months later. There he is, with that long orange hair. Oh, I wonder if it's as soft as it looks. I heard he's the top of the 6th year class, and it's only his first year. And he's friends with Kuchiki Byakuya. Seeing those together is like seeing a vision of true heaven. He's supposedly already at Fukutayaku level. And did you hear? He's only 31. Ooh, that's too bad. I don't want to be a cradle robber. Yeah, but when the cradle's so shiny that I think I would go for it. He's so handsome. I bet some of the guys have gone gay for him. And his scowl is so adorable. Ichigo's scowl was bordering on being murderous. Beside him, Byakuya Kuchiki laughed at his friend's misery. Said friend turned his scorching glare towards the Kusiki, which had no effect on the man, as he was used to it. Ichigo almost gave in to the urge to bang his or someone else's head. In the 2 months he had attended the academy, he had amassed a following of the most fearful creatures in the universes, fangirls. It had gotten so bad he couldn't sleep at night. Last he heard there were being written fanfictions about him, yaoi fanfictions. Ichigo shuddered. The worst part was that every day some chick would work up her courage to speak to him, and confess. The awkward rejection he had to give without making the girls cry were cringe-worthy. The worst part was that his any friend Byakuya seemed to be enjoying every moment of Ichigo's misery. How they had become friends still puzzled Ichigo. He had been minding his own business, hiding from a horde of rabid fangirls when the Kuchiki appeared beside him, sending him a sympathetic look. It was weird for Ichigo to see his one-time cold friend expressing his feelings so openly, and without his Haori and Kensiken. The Kuchiki heir's shoulder length was loose, and he seemed relaxed. Ichigo tried to not remember the way Byakuya died. You too? The raven-haired male had said to the prodigy. Ichigo had blinked in confusion. I mean the fangirls. They were all chasing me, like the rabid creatures they are. But it seems like they have found a new target named Shiba Ichigo, the new heir of the Shiba clan. Poor guy, I feel for him. My name is Kuchiki Byakuya, you can call me Byakuya, I don't like honorifics. The Kuchiki heir explained to a bemused Ichigo, who blinked in surprise before giving Byakuya a wry smile. Shiba Ichigo. But you can call me Ichigo, I don't like honorifics either. The reply had brought a light flush to Byakuya's cheeks, but he quickly recovered, smiling at the situation. From there all bets were off, according to Byakuya. They had been practically inseparable since then, mainly because it turned out that they shared all the classes, and the same dorm room. Also because Byakuya was the only one who Ichigo could be in close quarters with without wanting to run for the hills. Zanpakuta speech. At the 8th Squad. Barracks F. 3 captains and 1 vice-captain were currently enjoying a not-so-quiet afternoon. Those currently present, namely Unahona Retsu, Yukitake Jushiro, and Kyoraku Shunsui were all nursing a cup of tea while listening to the Fukuteichu of the 13th Squad wax poetic about his younger brother, the future head of the Shiba clan, Shiba Ichigo. Retsu had to admit that even though the constant chatter about the apparent prodigy was getting annoying, she was curious about the young man, who was by Seoul society terms still a child. She had been surprised to learn about the cure for the millennia-old sickness that the Taikaraku of the 13th was available in the world of living, and go with the flow. And though she had to ask, intimidate, the captain of the 12th, Urahara Kisuke to reform it to a soul's prescription, it was only a little time before Yukatake was fully free from the illness. The 1th squad's captain was doing better than he'd done in the 2 millennia of his existence, all thanks to that orange-haired prodigy. At the thought of the prodigy, Retsu remembered a certain fight and turned her attention towards the enigma that was the host of the gathering, one Kyoraku Shunsui. Cutting off Kaien, who was talking about how elegantly Ichigo held his chopsticks. Seems like he was coming down with a bad case of fanboy fever, the formidable captain of Squad 4 asked. Say, Shunsui-san, why did you fight the boy? I know that he insulted you, but that was rather unnecessary, don't you think? Retsu's question garnered the attention of those present, and the woman thanked the Ryu for small mercies as she managed to shut up Kaien. Shunsui, meanwhile, looked highly amused, as if anticipating the question, and knowing the sharp BSTRD, he probably wasn't planning on giving a straight answer. He insulted me, so I decided that the brat needed a spanking. Turns out the dog had bite to his bark, the laid-back man answered smirking and knowing that Retsu wouldn't be satisfied by his answer. Like he predicted, the subtle glare that was sent his way would have sent a lesser man for the hills, but Shunsui-s just raised his teacup. Don't compare my baby brother to a dog, Kyoraku Taishu. I distinctly remember him kicking your, as Kaien launched into another spiel, Retsu's glare was smoldering enough to melt steel. Shirnu Academy. Both Ichigo and Byakuya were enjoying a day out in the open park beside the academy. They had returned from a trip to the living world, which had gone with smooth sailing, and were resting as it was a Sunday. Byakuya cast a sideway glance towards the only person he considered a friend in this fangirl-filled hellhole. Shiba Ichigo was a lauded and proved prodigy. The boy had trounced every person he was pitted against in the practical sessions they had, and Byakuya almost winced at the memory of how one particularly arrogant 6th year's face had looked like after a 6-second-long beating he'd received after alluding that the Shibas had put their influence to good use for Ichigo to be able to attend 6th-year classes despite a 31-year-old first eye. Byakuya still marveled at how such a prodigy could be that young. Byakuya had been lauded as a genius himself, as he was finishing the academy in 3 years, but that was after he'd celebrated his 80th birthday. And somehow Ichigo had managed to bring all the attention Byakuya had held to himself in the span of 1 day. Not that Byakuya was complaining, in fact he was very happy not to be the center of the fangirls' focus. What he couldn't understand was Ichigo's continued confusion about why he attracted them. Even Byakuya, known for being blind to human beauty, could see the appeal Ichigo held. Long orange tresses pulled back in a low ponytail swayed in the angled features, a straight nose, and truly captivating chocolate-brown eyes with flecks of gold. And then there was the way he moved with the grace of a trained assassin. Even his voice had a calming quality to it, though the Kuchiki heir suspected that he was the only one who had heard him speak, as Ichigo interactions with the rest of the academy's populace consisted of glaring and ignoring. Byakuya was straight as a pole, but he'd admit that he found the orange-haired man handsome. Is there something on my face? You've been staring at me for the past 20 minutes. Ichigo's voice cut off Byakuya's decidedly inappropriate train of thought. Byakuya almost flushed, but thankfully he was born and bred a Kuchiki, so the man took the opportunity to ask the prodigy something that had been niggling on his mind. Ah, Ichigo-san, I was wondering if you could help me with my training. You see, I was hoping to achieve Shirkai by the time I would be graduating, but I've only been able to contact my Zanpakuto a few times, but I can't hold the connection. Byakuya ran a hand through his shoulder-length hair in a frustrated motion. He could sense the fact that he was close to achieving the first release, but somehow his connection with his Zanpakuto had not been as established as it should have been. Ichigo looked vaguely bemused at his question. It seemed like Senbazakura was avoiding his wielder, though he could see why. He'd observed Byakuya's spars in classes, and the way he wielded his Zanpakuto was impersonal, like it was only a tool, and not an extension of himself. It seemed like Byakuya required a lesson in Shinigami Zanpakuto relations. Byakuya-san, what exactly do you think a Zanpakuto means to us Shinigami? Ichigo asked the man he'd considered a brother long ago in the future. Byakuya's answer was sharp and predictable. A Zanpakuto is a tool we Shinigami use to purify the hollows. Nothing more, nothing less. The orange-haired man had to fight not to smack Byakuya in the head. Shiro was outraged. Tools, are we? Motherfucker, that we are alive. We are extensions of your soul. How would you guys fare if you lost us, huh? Probably be running around like headless chicken, like you did under Muramesa's rampage. What the F are they teaching in that FNG Academy, King? Ichigo winced at the sheer sound Shiro produced, but he had to agree with his Zanpakuto. He pinched the bridge of his nose. The relationship between a Zanpakuto and a Shinigami is much more complex than that. A Zanpakuto is a part of yourself, an eternal companion who knows every secret you have, and stands beside you regardless, and quite literally, an extension of our soul. I think the reason for your failure of not getting Shirkai is because you don't respect your Zanpakuto, and only view him or her, who knows, as a tool. Zanpakuto will give you all you want, the only thing they want in return is respect and acknowledgement. If your Zanpakuto is anything like you. Ichigo gave a wry smile as he finished his largely paraphrased explanation. Byakuya looked shell-shocked, before a determined expression took over his features. Thank you for your explanation, Ichigo-san. No wonder he didn't want to talk to me, if he indeed is anything like me. The last part was muttered quietly, but Ichigo heard it anyway, and snorted. The companionable silence was broken by the sound of rustling leaves. Ichigo and Byakuya exchanged wary glances. Ichigo got feeling of dread creeping up on him. Do you think? Byakuya nodded grimly in response to Ichigo's question, knowing that the beastly beings had them cornered. Both heirs waited warily for the rustling to subside, but as it was coming closer and closer, they lost the hope that the beasties had missed them. Ichigo began swearing under his breath, cursing his luck. Byakuya wasn't doing much better. Be calm and quiet, please, Ichigo-san. They smell fear. Pretend like everything's fine. Byakuya hissed through his teeth. Ichigo nodded solemnly. Look at you, King. The big hero of Siratii, cornered by a couple of fangirls. I'm dying. Shiro added his 2 cents. Ichigo scowled. Then come out and deal with them yourself, you big bad hollow. A simple "tch" was Ichigo's only response, and he allowed himself a smirk. Byakuya sent him a weird look, wondering what that was about. Acting casual. Ichigo mouthed back. Byakuya nodded in acceptance. The tension was palpable now. The subject of every female and even some male students tensed, before he decided that he'd had enough. F it, I'm out of here. Byakuya let out a surprised yelp as Ichigo grabbed him and shunpoed at lightning speed towards the safety of their shared dorm room. The Kuchiki heir stared wide-eyed at his surroundings before turning to Ichigo with an amazed expression. That was almost as fast as the Hellcat. Then it was Ichigo's turn to be surprised, as Byakuya kneeled in front of him. Please take me as your student, Ichigo-san, the heir of the Kuchiki heir said, head bowed. Ichigo sputtered for a full minute before sighing. Very well. But be prepared to be trained to your dead on your feet, Kuchiki. Now stand up. Oh, and training starts at 6 a.m., the smirk on Ichigo's face sent shivers down Byakuya's spine. What had he gotten himself into? Zanpakuto speech. Time skip, 2 months after Byakuya becomes Ichigo's student, and it's Christmas. Shiba clan mansion, Siratii, elders meeting, winter solstice. Shiba Kukaku was quietly observing Kaien as he got berated by the elders. Kaien had an unreadable look on his face, which meant to Kukaku that her brother was planning something. She had been equally as shocked as the elders evidently were when she learned that Kyan had inducted the kid he found as the future heir of the clan. While it wasn't technically something illegal, it was something that broke all protocol. The fireworks expert had to admit that while the Shibas weren't that big on protocol, inducting an heir without even introducing said person to the elders' council of the clan was something way over the line. She shifted her attention back to what the council leader, Shiba Kikuto, was saying. You refuse to marry, refuse to even look at the potential brides, and provide an heir of true Shiba blood to us, and then inducted a son of a renegade branch member as heir. Without even introducing us to him. Does the Rukon brat even know how the clan operates? Does he even have any kind of ryatsu? Why, Lord Kyan, why did you induct a person you just met as the heir of one of the great noble houses? Kukaku winced. It seemed like her Kyan Nii-san had made a right mess. The clan had just remained impassive. Someone cleared their throat, bringing the attention to themselves. Kukaku almost groaned when she saw who it was. Now, Kikuto-sama, calm down. We all know that, Lord Kyan has always made good decisions in the past. Though, I wonder if choosing a 31-year-old is the right choice, the elder trailed off, smirking when the room erupted in disbelieved muttering. Kukaku glared. Shiba Ryu was the single most despicable man who was born with the name Shiba. The man was most likely responsible for assassinating Kukaku's father, though they couldn't prove it. The slippery eel was too good to be caught. Shiba Ryu had been after the position of head of clan for centuries. And now, dropping a bomb like that, Kukaku shook her head in disbelief at the cheap shot. Although she was surprised to learn that the new heir was so young. What was Kyan thinking? Unbelievable. Shiba Kyan, is what council member Shiba Ryu said true? The council leader Shiba Kikuto thundered, silencing the room. Kyan didn't even twitch. Yes. The room erupted into mutterings once again, and Kikuto looked like he was having a seizure. Do you not understand what this means, Kyan? What if the boy does not have ryatsu when he gets older? They can't all be prodigies, you know. True depai was evident in Kikuto's wail. Unfortunately, Ryu took this opportunity to add his own 2 yen. If it should come to that, Kikuto-sama, my son would be automatically selected as the new head. Kikuto didn't look assured at all. Mainly because Ryu's son, Shiba Q, was a pathetic drunk infamous for raping women. The only reason he wasn't rotting in a cell was because Ryu kept the right pockets warm. Kukaku shuddered just thinking about the clan under him. Kyan cleared his throat, breaking many a person from the horrific imagery of Shiba Q as clan head. I do not think we have to worry about my Ochuodo having ryatsu. He is already attending the academy, and is graduating within the year, equaling Ikimara Jin's record, and breaking all other academy records ever created. Kyan smirked at the pin-drop silence his statement generated. Ryu sputtered, while Kikuto looked hopeful. Oh, really? Well, the council demands to meet him right now. I want to meet the newest prodigy of the Shiba clan. Where is he, Lord Kyan? Kyan's sweat dropped at Kikuto's quick change of attitude, while dreading the journey to fetch Ichigo from the academy. He's at the academy, Kikuto-sama. I am afraid I have to go fetch him, and it may take a while. Kyan explained to the exuberant elder. Kikuto looked pensive. Well, we can either take break while we wait, or we can extend this meeting to tomorrow. All in favor of extending? Well, extending it then. We will take a 2-hour break while you go fetch heir. What is his name, Lord Kyan? Kyan smiled. Shiba Ichigo. Shinu Academy, Ichigo's and Byakuya's room. Ichigo sneezed. Again. He'd been constantly sneezing for the past hour, even though he felt fine. Yawatch had suggested something about people talking behind his back, but Ichigo waved it off saying that if that had been the case, he'd never stop sneezing. A silent hum of agreement was his only answer. Are you really fine, Ichigo? Byakuya's voice pulled Ichigo out of his reverie. Ichigo blinked, and gave an imperceptible smile. Oh, just fine. Maybe it's something in the air. Byakuya looked skeptical, but let it go. Ichigo thought about the progression of the friendship he had somehow developed with Byakuya. The Shiba heir had helped the Kuchiki heir train in the last 2 months. Ichigo was still quite perplexed about the situation he had somehow landed himself in. He never ever imagined he'd end up teaching, much less Byakuya of all people. Though, he had to admit, the Kuchiki was a good student. He'd achieved his Shirkai in a matter of days after Ichigo agreed to train him, though Ichigo suspected it was more because his changed attitude than actual progress. Not that he hadn't progressed, of course. And Ichigo now knew the reason fangirls didn't chase Byakuya in the future. Senbonzakura's Shirkai was good for neutralizing big crowds after all. Now he didn't have to worry about girls jumping at him out of nowhere. The Shiba heir was broken out of his reverie once again when someone knocked on his door. Judging by the Ryatsu, he'd have to guess that it was Kaien. Though he couldn't understand why the clan head would meet him in the middle of the afternoon, on a weekday. Kaien knew that Ichigo had class in half an hour. I've got a weird feeling about this, King. Shiro said cautiously. Ichigo frowned in response. The Shiba clan heir finally got up and opened the door. He was, unfortunately, completely unprepared for what followed. Ah, Ichigo, my dear Otuto. I've come to fetch you, you are to be introduced to the elders. Don't look at me like that. You knew this was coming. And by the Ryu, you can't go there looking like this. We have to hurry so you can make you ready to face the council. First impressions and all that. Come on, we only have an hour and a half to get you ready. And don't worry about class, I explained your absence to Onabara, and he sent his condolences, and wishes you an early Merry Christmas. Your attendance is optional anyway. With that the Shiba clan leader grabbed a stunned Ichigo and shunpoed away. Byakuya blinked. And then he winced. Council meeting, huh? He didn't envy Ichigo at all. Shiba clan mansion. One Shiba Ichigo, formerly known as Kurosaki Ichigo, the nightmare to all hollows, the defeater of Aizen, was currently very, very afraid. As it turned out, apparently the elders had required his presence, which he was fine with. He then had to be bathed, and clothed into expensive clothing to not look like a street rat, which, though uncomfortable, he was fine with. What he wasn't fine with, however, was the fact that there were 3 very creepy women who were supposed to bath and clothe him. They had been staring at him constantly under the process, hands lingering longer than they should in inappropriate places, or touching him unnecessarily, gazes his every move. And now, as they were done after an hour and a half of torture, he was subjugated to 3 very aroused stares. 1. The women liked her lips. Now he was frantically looking for exists out of the hellhole. Luckily, that was the moment Kaien chose to interrupt. Ichigo never thought he'd be more grateful for another male's presence in his life. Hey, Ichigo, are you done? The meeting's about to start, the Shiba clan head trailed off, looking at Ichigo. He couldn't believe his Otuto could look more handsome than he already was, but he was apparently wrong. In a white kimono with a red dragon design, his Otuto was going to break many hearts today. And it complemented his orange locks well, too. His Otuto's hair was pulled in a loose braid that was slung casually over his shoulder. And his zanpakuto was beside his hips, in its shorter form of a trench knife. In short, Ichigo looked the definition of God. Said God was feeling very uncomfortable. What? Why are you staring at me like that, Kaien? Ichigo snapped, feeling even more creeped out. Kaien blinked, and a wide grin spread over his face. You'll make an impression, all right. Now, behave impassively, and don't let anyone under your skin. I know it's hard to believe, but there are some people on the council who would like nothing more than our heads on a platter. Golden platter. And when we are done, you have to dine at home. Kukaku insisted, Also Ishin-ji and Kikuto-ji would like to meet you personally. And enter after I call upon you. Ichigo just nodded along to everything Kyan was saying, eager to get out of reach of the creepy trio. At this point he'd agree to kill the Sutecho, just to get out of there. So the orange-haired man failed to notice that Kyan had just announced that he was going to get reacquainted with his past future father. Once they'd reached the doors to the meeting hall, Kyan cleared his face of any emotion, adopting an impassive expression. Ichigo raised an eyebrow, but adopted an identical expression. The guard standing outside the meeting hall shivered at the likeness the two brothers shared. Kyan motioned to said guards to open the doors, and went inside, motioning to Ichigo to wait. The meeting room had been filled with chatter, abruptly fell silent as the esteemed head of clan stepped back in. They started to mutter between themselves again when they noticed that Kyan was without company. Shiba Ryu smirked, sensing a false victory, and a chance to instate his pathetic son as heir. Ah, Lord Kyan, where is the prodigious heir of Clan Shiba? Could it be that you were only bluffing when you claimed The elder's voice was cut off when Kyan announced the arrival of his brother. Esteemed elders, Kikuto-sama, may I present to you, Shiba Ichigo, heir of Clan Shiba. As Ichigo stepped in, Kyan allowed himself a vindictive smirk at the expression of Shiba Ryu. The man was slack-jawed, and was blinking rapidly, as if to confirm what he was seeing. Not that the rest of the council was doing any better. Poor Ichigo was the center of attention for every single female in the room. Kyan even heard some aroused mms, making him shiver in disgust. Poor Ichigo looked disturbed. Kikuto blinked eye shocked surprise, before he pulled himself together and proceeded on with the meeting. Welcome, Heir Lord Ichigo. The council is delighted to finally meet you. Now, Lord Kyan told us a bit about your abilities, which, judging from your Ryatsu, are completely true. What level did you achieve? Kyan answered the old man's query before Ichigo could, making the younger of the two scowl lightly. He achieved level 9, high Fukutecho or low captain level. Kyan paused, letting it sink in before he dropped the bomb which would secure Ichigo's position as heir. But without showing his shirkai. The cacophony of sound that followed was music to Kyan's ears. Kikuto looked positively orgasmic, disturbing, while Ryo looked livid. Kyan's mental victory dance, and, "The storm's awesome," was cut off by the venomous voice of the murderer of his father. Shirkai, really? I thought your lies couldn't get any more preposterous, Lord Kyan. If young heir lord has indeed achieved Shirkai, I demand a demonstration of it. Before the enraged clan head could answer, he was beaten by the heir lord. Very well. Who will be my opponent? Ryo looked surprised by Ichigo's quick answer. His plan seemed to have backfired, Kyan thought amusedly. The Shiba clan head was surprised himself, but he wasn't very worried. Ichigo could wipe the floor with every fighter in the room blindfolded, including Kyan. Ryo was probably going to name himself as the opponent as the man was a third seat in the Onmitsukido. As expected, Ryo smirked rising from his seat. Kyan would enjoy seeing him getting beaten. I will be your opponent, child, the arrogant man announced. Ichigo nodded his acceptance, though Kyan could see the irritation at being called a child clearly through his mask. Kikuto sighed in defeat. Very well. The council will all attend the fight, which will take place in 20 minutes in the Shiba training grounds, the man announced. Any ground rules? The orange-haired man asked Ryo. Said man smirked, knowing that he was allowed to lay his own rules for this fight. And Kyan wasn't very surprised when he heard the man's answer, though it seemed like the rest of the council, judging by the gasps. The fight isn't over until one of us dies. Shiba Ryu, infant, remember that name. Ichigo looked visibly surprised, casting a questioning look towards Kyan, who nodded imperceptibly, answering the orange-haired man's unasked question about the validity of the rule. It seems like our Otudo will avenge you today, father. Kyan thought as walked towards the clan's private training grounds, the council following him. A tap on his shoulder shifted his attention towards Kakaku. His sister wore a grim expression. Will Oya-ji be avenged today, Nii-san? Kakaku asked quietly, confirming Kyan's suspicions. That. The same thing was going through his sister's head. Kyan nodded solemnly. Yes, he was going to enjoy today. The Shiba training grounds. Ichigo was watching his opponent impassively. From what he'd gathered from Kyan's reactions to this man, he was probably the designated heir before Ichigo got inducted. And now his opponent had declared the match to be fought till one of them was dead, probably looking to remove the Ichigo-shaped obstacle from his race to the clan's headship. Ichigo scoffed inwardly, as if that was ever going to happen. Ichigo had no qualms about killing this man. Kyan was right, the Shibas did have a talent of seeing the hearts of people, only in Ichigo it was 10 times stronger, unsurprisingly, making him able to read, or rather hear thoughts. Most of the time he shut it off, like any sane and uninvasive individual, only saving it to use for certain battles and to read any new people he accepted into his inner circle. And when Shiba Ryo had announced the fight to end with the death of one of them, the orange-haired prodigy had allowed himself a quick peek into his declared opponent's thoughts, and found himself reeling in disgust. If Ichigo had any thought of sparing the elder, they went out the garganta. Apparently this thing who dared to call himself a Shiba, had several skeletons in his closet. Ichigo cast a quick look towards Kyan and Kakaku, who were both seated in the stands. He couldn't understand how his brother could stand being in the same room as his father's killer. Ichigo shook his head. And refocused on the fight. There was still 5 minutes till it began, but it seemed like Ryo was ready. The 20 minutes interlude was only there because the Central 46 apparently needed to be notified when a noble from one of the 4 great houses entered a fatality-based fight. And now 2 nobles were entering a fight. Just as he thought, a hell butterfly came through and landed at the head of Council's finger. He listened to its message, before he turned to Arena and signaled the fight to be begun. Ryo smirked arrogantly. Get ready, infant. Sure Kai, ha. I doubt you even can do a simple shunpa. Kyan might fool everyone else, but I know better. Now get ready to be penalized. With that, the elder launched himself at Ryo or Ichigo. Kyan had instilled a Kido on the fighting ground, making the council members able to hear every single word. Why he'd done so, was a mystery to even him, but a gut feeling told him that it was important that the council heard whatever that was said on th field. Ichigo was silent after hearing the taunt, and sidestepped the admittedly fast attack pointedly with a flicker of shunpa, surprising his attacker. In a millisecond, he had his trench knife at Ryo's throat. Just like you penalized Shiba-san. Ichigo's soft query panicked the elder, and sent the council into a shocked silence. Ryo shunpoed as far away from Ichigo as he could get. His eyes were making frantic motions, he was truly panicked. He hadn't expected in his wildest dreams that Kyan had actually been telling the truth about the Air Lord. This could prove to be a hassle, even though the elder thought he had the advantage of experience. He put on a sneer. After all, what was said in the arena between the heir and the elder, would stay between them. Ah, so you somehow know of Saiyan's untimely death, and the truth behind it. How, I must ask you how you know of it. Was it perhaps your elder brother who told you? The elder answered, sending the council into disbelieving mutterings. This was treason of the highest caliber, killing your own blood. Ichigo remained impassive outwardly, though inwardly he was seething in disgust at the elder's self-assuredness of not being caught. In a flicker of shunpa, he attacked the arrogant BSTRD head-on, each slash and stab meeting its mark. It was not long before Shiba Ryo was a bloodied mess, barely hanging on to life. Ichigo brought his trench knife to Ryo's throat one last time. Since it was your last query, I will answer it. Because of my high Ryatsu as a child, my sensing, the name of the hidden Shiba talent, was strong. As my Ryatsu grew, so did my sense. It is so strong, it allows me to hear thoughts. And you were thinking of how you killing me, like you enjoyed killing Saiyan. Farewell, Shiba Ryo, and may you always burn in hell. With that, Ichigo cut Ryu's throat. Kakuto's announcement of the winner was cut off as gates of hell opened, once again stunning the council. Even Kaien looked surprised. There should be a lot of evil to be done if you were born a soul to end up in hell. Apparently Ryu had achieved that feat. As the gates closed, Kakuto pulled himself together and, unnecessarily, announced the winner. Winner, Heir Lord Ichigo. A polite applause from the council followed. As Ichigo reached the stands, he was taken into a bone-crushing hug by Kakaku. Thank you. Thank you. She repeated several times before letting go. Kaien just stood there with an unreadable look on his face before he finally said his thoughts. You got some filth on your kimono, Ichigo. Be careful next time. Ichigo blinked before he noticed that the hem of his kimono had been dirted by some of Ryu's blood. Shiro voiced his thoughts. Now we know why he been emitting so much killin' intent when he went to fetch you, and why there was always an angsty feelin' to his Ryatsu. That man must have been a real pain in the butt. Ichigo thought that was an understatement if he ever heard one. Yawatch agreed. Zanpakuto speech. Shiba clan mansion, elders meeting room. One Shiba Kakuto was in a rage. Not only had one of the elders of his council killed the former clan leader, but he'd clearly done something more terrible, if his fate as an eternal sinner was something to judge by. The icing on the cake was that Kaien had insisted several times to him that Ryu had too much power. But every time Kakuto had waved his concerns aside. After all, if someone was mildly unpleasant, it didn't mean that they were mass murderers. But right now his attention was drawn to the young man, who was actually a child in terms of age. But Kakuto felt as if his experience of 1,000 years of life were nothing compared to the experiences the young heir lord had undoubtedly experienced. The elder was also curious about his sensing abilities. As far as he was aware, only the strongest Shibas had the ability. Shiba Ishin, who was a captain-level Shinigami, had told him in a rare moment of seriousness that if he went into Bankai, and concentrated hard enough, he could hear snippets of his opponent's thoughts. But the heir lord had apparently heard everything Ryu had thought, so much so that he got the slippery eel to admit one of his greatest secrets. Without even entering his shurikai. Such a mystery. This young man council leader finally called order to the meeting. Quiet down. I know that the shocking revelations of today have stunned us to the very core. Lord Kaien, what do you suggest we do? Kakuto knew that Kaien's word would be the final say in the action the council was going to do. Kaien was after all, a charismatic leader, and no one beside Ryu had ever disagreed with him. Kaien seemed thoughtful, before he answered. I would like for the clan to send the details of the revelations to the Onmitsukido, conveniently leaving out anything about sensing, of course, and have them lead a thorough investigation. After all, it is their third seat who was revealed to be an eternal sinner. Kaien paused. Then a small vindictive smirk graced his face. And I would think it will be beneficial for us to hand over Shiba Q to them as well. After all, his escapades are no secret from anyone. Everyone grimaced at the mention of the pathetic son of Ryu. After the motion had passed with an overwhelming, one of the elders, Shiba Natsumi, and, thanks, asked Kaien something hesitantly. Lord Kaien-sama, you always opposed Elder Ryu. Could it be that you knew of his deeds? The council became still at the query, and focused their attention back to Kaien once again, who had an inscrutable look on his face. Kakuto winced as he realized that Kaien was very close to cracking, if his Ryatsu was anything to go by. Yes. I knew that Ryu was an evil man. I knew that he needed to be thrown out of the council, and possibly the clan. I knew that. A look of anguish came over Kaien's face as he finally lost control of his Ryatsu. In milliseconds, Ichigo was beside him, providing his brother comfort. Kaien visibly struggled to regain his control as he continued. I knew that he murdered father. Because I was there. The night father was assassinated, he was very tired. He'd recently returned from a month-long stay in Hueco Mundo. So he was an easy prey for Ryo. I was only a recent graduate from the academy then. I didn't have enough credentials to convince the council or the C-46 of Ryo's deeds, not without solid evidence. So, I worked hard to become a stronger and more respectable as a Shinigami. But it wasn't enough. I still didn't have enough evidence against Ryo. But then along came my brother. Kyan gave Ichigo a soft smile. I can't say how grateful I am, Ototo, that you managed to kill that BSTRD, and at the same time provided evidence against him. I was surprised that the gates of hell appeared, as I am not aware of Ryo's other ventures. The silence that Kyan's emotional outburst generated was broken by the occasional sniffle. Poor Natsumi was looking horribly guilty. Kakuto clenched his fists, his rage reappearing. That all this had happened under the nose of the council was a wake-up call. But the elder pulled himself together. He focused his attention towards the Air Lord, who was comforting his older brother. Clearing his throat, Kakuto brought everyone's attention towards himself. We are all grateful, Air Lord. I am curious about how you managed to sense the sinner's thoughts. I think we're all aware of your high Ryatsu, as we can all sense it. Why don't you suppress it? By the even then, a captain-level Shiba can only hear snippets of thoughts when they are in Bankai, and you clearly didn't even release Shirkai. Ichigo scowled at the query about his Ryatsu as he thought of a suitable reply. To answer your question, Council Leader, my sense has always been strong. I have to suppress its reach, or I am subjected to everyone's thoughts, and I don't want to invade anyone's privacy. Despite that, I am still able to sense auras. The reason I used my sense on the sinner was because he was emitting a stained aura, like his soul was drenched in a foul substance. As for your other question, well, I am suppressing my Ryatsu. What you are sensing is approximately 20% of my unreleased Ryoyuko. The elders were all beyond being shocked by the Air Lord, as proven by the blink and subsequent shrug most of them took. Kyan looked amused. It seemed like Ichigo had made the impression he desired. But something was nagging on the clan head's mind. He turned towards the council leader. If you don't mind me asking, Kakuto-sama, how did you get to know about Ichigo? I was going to introduce him today anyways, but I had planned him as a surprise, mainly so Ryo didn't attempt anything against him. Kakuto looked a bit sheepish at the question. Ah, well you see. A couple of weeks ago, Kuchiki Jinrei showed up on our weekly tea session, looking slightly gobsmacked. Then he invited us to the annual Kuchiki Ball, which is on Christmas Eve, in 2 days, insisting repeatedly that I bring the new Shiba Air Lord to the ball, along with the clan head, of course. I was totally confused, but I masked it well enough. So I took this meeting as an opportunity to find out what was going on. And I must ask the Air Lord for the reason that Lord Kuchiki is so interested in him. Ichigo blinked, slightly bemused by Kakuto's answer and the subsequent question. That would probably be because I have a good friendship with Air Lord Kuchiki Byakuya. The orange-haired man hid a smile, remembering the reason for Jinriai's gobsmacked expression. Apparently Byakuya had never accepted anyone outside Yoruchi and Jushiro as friends in his 90 years of life. So the elder Kuchiki was reasonably surprised when Ichigo and Byakuya were messing around, in typical teenage fashion on one of the occasions they went to the Kuchiki mansion one weekend. Of course Jinrei had probably interrogated Byakuya after Ichigo had left, and he probably told him who Ichigo was. Not that Ichigo minded. The Air Lord refocused at what the council leader was saying. He sighed almost out loud when he got to know that they were finally done. Kuchiki Mansion, Christmas Eve. Ichigo was sitting on the porch of the Kuchiki, preferring to be alone. He was brooding, tired of keeping a polite smile on his face, pitying the hosts, especially Byakuya. He was also mad at his SCRTS, Kyan, Kakuto and his past-future father. Illy, after forcing him through another session with the creepy trio, they should at least have the decency to accompany him through this ball. He grimaced, remembering his meeting with Isshin, and the revelations it had brought. Flashback, 2 days ago, after the council meeting. Kyan, Kikuto and Ichigo were having dinner. They were all in one of the most hard-to-reach and well-secured areas in the mansion, giving them freedom to talk about anything and everything. Kikuto was asking Ichigo about his powers, and he was giving him the bullshit backstory, as dubbed by Shiro. Suddenly someone entered the room, surprising Ichigo while Kikuto and Kyan remained unsurprised. Then Ichigo took a good look at who'd entered. It was his future father, though the man likely didn't know it. But what surprised Ichigo was that man had sideburns. And no goatee. Ha! It seemed like Shiba Ishin was doomed to make bad decisions regarding his facial hair. Shiro and Yawatch remained quiet, as they were probably busy fighting of yet another flashback of yet another painful death. Ah, Ishin-ji, finally. Let me introduce you to our new heir lord, Ichigo, and this is my G, you probably don't need to call him G. Kyan introduced the two of them. Ichigo looked slightly bemused. It seemed like his father had missed the meeting if his surprised reaction at his identity was anything to go by. And he was probably freaked out by the similarities between Kyan and Ichigo. Pleasure to make your acquaintance, though, I must ask, why weren't you at the meeting, Ishin-san? The man in question blinked as Ichigo winced inwardly at calling his father by his name. He preferred goat face. Kyan exchanged a glance, and Kyan gave a slight nod. Ichigo blinked at the exchange, slightly confused. Kikuto sighed. Well, we might as well tell you now and be done with it. Kai-chan, could you please cast a privacy keto? The elder voiced out, confusing Ichigo even more. Kyan twitched at the butchering of his name, though he obliged. Ishin ran a tired hand through his hair. It is a rather long explanation. Ichigo-sama. You. See, this is the most well-kept secret of the Shiba clan, and the reason why there haven't been that many Shiba captains. You see, when a Shiba reaches Bankai, the Ryu offers him or her a place in the royal guard. Although you can decline, or retire, many Shibas decide to accept the offer. I was offered the same when I reached Bankai 50 years ago. As you can see, I accepted. Thus my reason for being late. Ishin explained. Ichigo was wide-eyed at the end of the explanation. Did his father just say what he heard? And did he use a FNG honorific? He literally felt Shiro going green. Ichigo refocused. Please, for the love of all things holy, do not use honorifics when talking to me. Ichigo bit out. Ishin blinked, then shrugged in acceptance. Looks like the hate of honorifics was universal. Flashback end. Ichigo shook himself out of his reverie. He shivered slightly. It looked to be a cold night. He almost jumped when someone touched his shoulder, before turning to face his companion. Byakuya looked slightly smug as Ichigo turned to face him. It seems like I finally surprised you, sensei, the raven-haired man said arrogantly as Ichigo glared at him without heat. They held their postures for a while, before breaking into laughter. Zanpakuto speech. Kuchiki Mansion. Isn't he the most appealing man, Kiko? Oh, yes. But he is quite young, isn't he? He probably won't marry for a couple of centuries. But that doesn't mean he isn't a good catch. Heir lord of one of the great noble houses, and the most talented to enter the academy. I hear he'll probably be a seated officer by the time he's out of the academy. Maybe even a lieutenant. He is quite popular at the academy, though he doesn't have that many friends, I hear. Oh my. But I heard that he and the Kuchiki heir lord are close. It sure looks so. Aren't you seeing those two walking alongside each other? They look like they were taken out of an art piece. Do you think? As all the ladies who were talking got a violent nosebleed, Ichigo and Byakuya rushed out of the ballroom. They were going to meet the interim Kuchiki lord, Kuchiki Jinrei at his request, or rather, Ichigo was going to meet him. Unfortunately that meant that they had to pass through the ballroom where all the guests were enjoying themselves. Ichigo breathed a sigh of relief when they finally reached their destination, and then blinked in surprise. So this was where Kaien, Kakuto, and Isshin hid out. Without him. Luckily, for the elder Shibas, Ichigo noticed someone else in the room before he could reunite his foot with Kaien's face. Byakuya cleared his throat. "Grandfather, this is my friend, Heir Lord Shiba Ichigo, who is also training me." "Ichigo, my grandfather, Kuchiki Jinrei, interim Kuchiki Lord." Ichigo bowed slightly. "It is nice to meet Yo Dash." The orange-haired man was cut off in typical Shiba fashion by Kaien and Isshin. "You're training him?" "Why?" the two yelled simultaneously. Ichigo was rather taken aback, but was saved the trouble of explaining when Byakuya cut in. "I asked him for help, Kaien-sama. You see, the two of us have unfortunately accumulated a Shutter fan following, so when Ichigo used a Shunpa almost on par with the Helka, Shihoin-san to save us from the creatures, I knew that I had the perfect opportunity to become stronger." Kaien and Isshin seemed to be surprised, and Kaien looked to shout out another question. Once again, Kaien was saved. "Oh really now? Tell me, how is my grandson faring, Heir Lord Shiba?" Kuchiki Jinrei asked curiously. The old man had been quiet until now, observing Ichigo. With his long orange hair up in a ponytail, and a appealing kimono in a light brown color which brought out his magnificent eyes, the Shiba heir truly was a sight. And that Ryatsu. Jinrei had truly been surprised to note that this Shiba actually wasn't on a constant hype, like the rest of the clan, a fact he welcomed. The Kuchiki clan had refocused, noting that Ichigo was answering his query. Of course he is talented, as proven by him spending only 3 years at the academy. But he was stuck when it came to contacting his Zanpakuto. I just gave him a shove in the right direction. Hearing his answer, Byakuya smirked, something Jinrei noticed. "Is it something you would like to add, Byakuya?" Jinrei asked, knowing that this could lead to knowing the Shiba heir, who was clearly trying to downplay himself, better. Byakuya coughed, hiding a snort, knowing that Ichigo would be embarrassed if he told everyone present just how good he was. And best friends live to embarrass each other. "Oh, just that he helped me achieve my Shirkai in 12 days after he started teaching me. And we've been training for the past 3 months. Every day. Ichigo reckons I am about the same level as a 3rd seat. Just to illustrate my point, I will admit to being weaker than a 20th seat when we began training." The pin-drop silence that followed caused Byakuya to smile in satisfaction. The sweet sound of silence caused by shock. Meanwhile Ichigo was debating ways he could key-train Byakuya when they got back to school. A Shunpa race around the girls' dorms sounded really nice. And the fact that most of them were fangirls had just slipped his mind. Apparently. He was suddenly being suffocated by a real emotional Kaien, who was rambling on about how proud he was, and how, yeah you get the picture. Noting that Ichigo was turning an unhealthy shade of blue, Jinrei quickly intervened. "Shirkai. That is truly good news, Byakuya. If we could have a demonstration of it sometime tomorrow, that would be great, and cement your position as a heir lord. What is your opinion, Ichigo-san?" Ichigo, who had been released, sent Jinrei a grateful look before he smirked. "I am sorry, Jinrei-sama, but you have to wait until the graduation ceremony. Wouldn't want to spoil a surprise, would I?" Jinrei blinked at the answer, before he sighed. "You really like surprising people, don't you?" the Kuchiki head half-asked, half-stated to Ichigo, who smirked once again. "What can I say? People look so funny when they are surprised. It's my only source of entertainment anyways. Have you not noticed how funny Kaien looks when he's shocked?" As Kaien burst into indignant protests, Jinrei smiled secretively. It looked like his grandson was in the right hands. Shinoyu Academy, after holidays, Zanjutsu class. Ichigo was annoyed. Really, annoyed. The constant admiring glances from the female pupils, and some of the guys, was getting to him. He didn't remember them being so obvious before the holidays. Of course they'd sent him glances, but they did it discreetly. Now though they were almost staring at openly. He'd thought that the teacher would do something, but it appeared as if he'd joined the rest of them in Ichigo watching. "Hey, King, I have an idea," Shiro said, interrupting his plans of escape. Ichigo sighed, maybe his hollow sword had a good solution to this problem. "Go on, Shiro," Ichigo said back in his mind. He didn't want to give the class a reason to stare, more that is. "I thought maybe you could scare them into SBMSN. Just ask the teacher to spar with you, and then cream him. That way that pervert will stop FNG staring at your hair." Ichigo shuddered at Shiro's implication, but considered his suggestion. Ichigo felt a shiver run down his spine, and turned around. Did the FNG just drool while staring at Ichigo's hair? "That's it, that fucker is going so down he'll end up in hell. Shiro, if this backfires, you're responsible." Shiro sputtered in response, demanding some logic. Ichigo walked to the teacher. "Oki-sensei, could you spar with me?" Ichigo asked the pervert, barely keeping from making a face of disgust. Though if the amused expression of Byakuya was anything to go by, he wasn't very successful. Oh, of course. Of course, Ichigo-san. It will be a pleasure to be hit by yo, I mean, it is my responsibility as a teacher to make sure that my students are learning. Lead the WA. As Oki stammered out a confirmation, Ichigo made his way to one of the training rings. Unfortunately, Byakuya muttered something when he passed him. "Good luck, Ichigo. I was wondering when you were going to break, and by the way, he's still staring at your derriere, like the rest of the class." Ichigo shot Byakuya a glare, which the noble responded to with a smirk. Note to self, make Byakuya run 10 laps around the whole of Siriidii, at full speed, which is to be followed by a good old spar. Ichigo thought to himself. Noted. Yawatch muttered, feeling a little sorry for the poor noble. Ichigo finally took a stance, which may have looked a little loose to newbies, but for an experienced fighter, it was easy to see that Ichigo was deceivingly open. Fortunately for Oki, he was experienced enough to notice the deceptiveness of the stance. Unfortunately for Oki, Ichigo was a war veteran. And was proved to be stronger than the Soul King when he defeated the united form of the Ryu and Juhobok. Shiro grinned gleefully in Ichigo's inner world. Pervert Sensei was going down, all right. The tension was obvious in Oki's shoulders, and when after a minute of neither parties attacking, the pervo attacked. Ichigo was slightly surprised at noticing the killing intent the sensei excluded, but quickly dodged the flurry of stabs and slashes that Oki generated, making it clear that he wasn't even bothered by enough to use Shunpa. Or draw Zangetsu. Oki paused after a while, accepting the fact he couldn't match Ichigo, breathing heavily while taking a defensive stance. Ichigo just raised an eyebrow. It seems like the rumors aren't without truth. You are indeed a Fukutecho level Shinigami if you were able to avoid my attacks without even using Shunpa. And I am a former member of the Onmitsukido. Oki's statement caused gasps of surprise from the audience. The class was now sending Ichigo weird looks, especially the fangirls. Ichigo steeled himself as to not shift uncomfortably, or scream. Oki then said something that caught Ichigo's attention. And the rest of the class as well. Well, it seems I have to release my Shirkai. Shine, Akiko. A bright light erupted, blinding Ichigo and the rest of the students. This seemed to be Oki's objective as he grabbed Ichigo's partial blindness as a chance to attack. Ichigo surprised Oki as he blocked the attack and the flurry that followed without even looking. Without Zangetsu. It was now clear to see Oki's frustration, partially because the class regained their sight, and partially because he was cursing like a sailor. And every one of Oki's students knew that the man hated nothing more than cursing. Nothing. Byakuya smirked. Ichigo smiled coldly, a habit he'd picked from Aizen. Thank you for the spar, Oki-sensei. I will enjoy crushing you. Oh, and never stare at my butt. Ever. Thank you. With that, Ichigo disappeared in a flicker of Shunpa. What happened next was blur for the class. But when the dust cleared from the hole in the wall, they noticed that Oki was lying in the rubble, unconscious. Ichigo wiped some invisible dust off HS uniform. Well, that's that. Come, Byakuya, I have a great training plan for you today. Tell me, how does, as Byakuya paled, the class exchanged wide-eyed glances. Oh wow. He's more awesome than I thought. He was so dreamy. He's probably the Ryu in disguise. Don't be greedy. Well, now that I think about it, it might be a possibility. Possibility. I believe fully that Ichigo-sama is the Ryu. And even if he wasn't, it doesn't matter. He's surely stronger than the Ryu. We must honor him. What if we all go down on one knee and bow to him when he is in the vicinity? Oh yes. That will make him feel comfortable with us. Oh, how wrong they were. Oh I just had to do one. One Jingoro Onabara stared. Blinked, stared. He then closed and opened his mouth repeatedly like a goldfish. Care to repeat that? The head academy instructor uttered to his informant. I said that Kurosaki Ichigo hospitalized dash. No, who cares about that perv? I was talking about the part where the advanced 6th year class decided that Ichigo was a version of the Ryu. Is it really true? Onabara interrupted, making the informant sweat drop. Well, yes. Silence. Then a snort. A cough, hiding a chuckle. Full-blown laughter. The informant was now sweating buckets, believing that he'd broken the man. Onabara finally calmed down, though he was still giggling, which he would deny to his second death. Looks like Ichigo had landed himself in a royal mess, the head thought, as he once again erupted in thigh-slapping laughter. Endo make. Next, graduation. Shunsui Academy, dorms. Byakuya sighed. He'd been watching Ichigo pace for the past 0.3 hours, was it? It certainly felt longer than that. But he could understand why Ichigo was so tense. The man had barely had enough sleep in the past months after his fight with Oki, the Pervo-sensei. For some unfathomable reason the students had decided that Ichigo was an incarnation of the Ryu, and had decided to bow in front of him wherever he went. Unfortunately this meant that Ichigo was chased by every single female, and some of the males at the academy. Not even Senbazakura's sharp petals could keep the horde away. Some had even resorted to camp outside their dorm room. Luckily, Ichigo managed to scare them away. Byakuya had known that Ichigo was dangerous when angered, but now he knew that the word dangerous could never describe the sheer killing intent of Ichigo. Flashback. Seiba Kino was a well-known and much-hated third-year student at the Shunsui Academy. Belonging to a wealthy minor noble family, the boy was used to being on the top of the food chain. When he'd arrived at the academy, he'd been expected to walk on rose petals and being praised by the teachers. Unfortunately for Kino, Byakuya was on top of the food chain in the academy, and he'd wasted no time in setting the record straight when Kino had tried to lord over him. The teachers had given Byakuya a mild reprimand for the action of beating another heir, though to a minor family, extensively. That beating had caused Kino to not approach Byakuya again, even though he still treated the rest of the pupils with hate, and Byakuya had suspected he planned to get revenge for humiliation he'd endured at Byakuya's hands at some point. He was right. Kino had approached him when he wasn't with Ichigo, assured in himself to be able to take Byakuya down, even though was 3 years his senior. Apparently he'd achieved Shirkai. Apparently. Oh, if it isn't Kachiki Heim. How are you this fine evening? I hear you are graduating. Though, I wonder how much the Kachikis paid for you to be placed 3 years ahead. You don't even have Shirkai, unlike me. Though the amount the Kachikis paid must have been minuscule compared to what the Shibas must have paid. Unknown to Seiba, Ichigo had chosen that moment to appear behind him. The whole school was now watching the altercation. Kino continued his rant. That Shiba Ichigo is just a pretty boy pansy. Like you. Prodigy, ha. I doubt he knows how to shunpa. Bribing the academy to get them through easily must be a trait in that family. Now Byakuya pitted Kino. Ichigo was very protective of his friends and family. Very protective. Seiba didn't notice his impending doom as he continued. I mean, I've seen that Shiba Kyan dude around, and he's a right idiot. There's no way he could have graduated in 2 years without any extra bribing. And I've also seen that orange BSTRD around. He barely participates in class fights. I bet that the fight with Oki was staged to throw people off their tray. Seiba cut himself off when he finally noticed the killing intent Ichigo had been giving off, and nearly yelped when he came face to face with Ichigo. The orange-haired man took a step forward, expression blank. Then he smiled coldly. The whole school shuddered in fright. I don't know how to fight, do I? Well, I hope you don't mind if you spar with me. Ichigo said in a faux light tone. Seiba, the fool he was, straightened himself and took the opportunity as one to prove himself right. Oh yeah? Well, come with it, you lying, Shiba. The whole school winced. Ichigo's expression turned blank once again before he disappeared, only to reappear beside Byakuya, who was standing 100 feet away. Seiba was still, before his various wounds which Ichigo had apparently afflicted on him in the SPND of 2 seconds erupted in gruesome display of blood. Ichigo turned to the school with the same cold smile on his face. If anyone ever insults my family and friends again, they will find themselves dead. Is that clear? As the whole school nodded frantically, Ichigo shunpoed to the dorms, leaving Byakuya. Seiba Kino had been hospitalized for 4 months. Flashback end. That was the day that the school had learned to keep a distance from Ichigo, and not to insult his loved ones. Though the students still had secret shrines of Ichigo. But that was not what was bugging Ichigo right now. What was bugging him was the fact that the final exam was tomorrow, and he still had not picked a squad. He'd ruled out the 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 11th, 12th and to some degree, the 13th, Byakuya pinched the bridge of his nose. The raven-haired man knew that he himself was going to Division 6, since the Kachikis practically reigned there. He sighed. Ichigo, you've been pacing a hole in the floor. Why don't you just join Division 6 and be over with it? Byakuya said in an annoyed tone. Ichigo, to his delight, stopped and sat down, with a thoughtful look on his face. I want to join the 5th, cause that would mean to be closer to Aizen, but Ichigo's train of thought was abruptly cut off as Yawatch interrupted him. What exactly is your plan regarding Aizen, Ichigo? The Quincy spirit asked. Ichigo hesitated. Well, I was thinking of killing him, and Tosen ASAP. The answer was met with silence from his partners, before Yawatch finally relented. I understand. But you must be ready to face the complication if do so. You'll be changing the future forever, as Aizen was a big planner of it. I wouldn't have Arankars, as they would not exist without Aizen, but Juhabak is a definite threat. My older version is crueler than Aizen in many ways, and the only reason we survived that war was because even though the Quincy were defeated, we lost. And you know that he was the one who set Aizen loose. By then Aizen had lost his sanity. The older sword spirit said what Ichigo already knew, reminding him of the possibilities. Ichigo knew that Juhabak was a much bigger threat than Aizen could ever hope to be. Juhabak had crippled Soul Society in such a manner that they could never hope to recover. Every one of Ichigo's friends had lost a big part of themselves during the 10-year-long war with the Quincies. Aizen had just finished the job killing them. Shiro chose that moment to insert his own 2 yen. I agree with the Quincy. As for TH divisions, join the 6th, Byakuya isn't so bad, and it wouldn't invoke Aizen's suspicions. And the 6th Division barracks are close to the 5th. Ichigo blinked in surprise. Ha! His hollow liked Byakuya. Who would have thought? He raised his head and spoke. Byakuya. Hn. I've decided on the 6th. Byakuya stilled. A moment passed. Another. And another. And then Ichigo was engulfed in a hug, surprised. Really? Thank you. This way grandfather will be off my back about my training. We are going to have the best time ever. Did Ichigo mention that Byakuya talked like a kid when he was excited? The orange-haired man suppressed a chuckle, and peeled the kuchiki off himself. Calm down. Now get off me so I can tell Jinrei-sama that I accept his offer. Shoo! Byakuya grinned once more before quieting down and going back to his bed. Ichigo suppressed a chuckle, while Shiro laughed. If only Rukia was here. Shunsui Academy, last exam. Jinrei was sitting in the podium of the fighting arena. It was the last exam the graduates were taking, determining their strength in combat. The graduates had to fight each other using Ho-Ho, Hakuda, Kido, and most importantly Zenjutsu. As predicted, Byakuya and Ichigo were pitted against each other, being the strongest of their class. Jinrei was looking forward to finally seeing his grandson's Shirkai. The past 6 months since Christmas had been filled with anticipation. He knew he wasn't the only one who was excited for this, as he spotted Fukuteicho Shiba, Yukatake Taicho, Kairako Taicho, Hirako Taicho and Anahona Taicho in the crowd. He even spotted Yoruchi. The Shihoin had probably heard about Ichigo's Shunpa, and come to assess if he was as good as told. The captains looked bored, as the fights up until now had been exceptionally boring, with the highlight being a female student crying, "Oh my Ichigo-sama," causing much confusion. Apparently the student population of Shunsui thought that Ichigo was an incarnation of the Ryu. Jinrei shook his head in silent amusement. Suddenly the announcer said what every single captain had been anticipating. Up next, Shiba Ichigo-sama and Kuchiki Byakuya. Finally. Wait, did he say, Sama? Shiba Kaien's confused voice exclaimed loudly. He was promptly ignored, as the fighters entered the arena, looking impassive. They both adapted stances, though Byakuya's was a little more aggressive, as one's should be when facing a stronger opponent, Jinrei observed approvingly. Ichigo, on the other hand, had adopted a relaxed, but deceptive stance. Begin. As soon as the umpire announced the match to be fought, Byakuya shunpoed towards his enemy, knowing that he was the weaker one, and as such he had to create his own openings. Ichigo blocked each one Byakuya's lightning-fast attacks, just using his long Zanpakuto to absorb the hits. He knew Byakuya's fighting style intimately, having been his teacher for the past year, and having fought in his past timeline. After a few minutes of blocking became boring, Ichigo shunpoed away, creating a little distance between himself and Byakuya. In the crowd, Yoruchi whistled. I guess my little Byakuya has improved under that hunk of a teacher. And that Shunpa he did just now, wow, the princess exclaimed loudly. On the battlefield, Ichigo smirked to Byakuya. My turn, Byakuya. Byakuya smirked as Ichigo was suddenly on him, forcing him back. He tried to block and parry the attacks, but even though he managed to block a few, most of the attacks managed to get him. Byakuya winced as another slash managed to get his arm. He quickly realized his disadvantage and shunpoed away, using Aikido to create a distraction, knowing what he had to do. The Kuchiki Air Lord stood still, before unleashing Scatter, Senbon Sakura. As a million sakura petals surrounded the orange man, attacking him, his smirk widened. Finally, something to fight. Both Ichigo and Byakuya attacked at the same time, this time fighting more evenly. Meanwhile, Jinrei was assessing his grandson's Shirkai. It was magnificent. It had an elegant and subtly deceptive deadliness. Many opponents would dismiss it as being a pretty trick, not recognizing the true potential of the sakura petals. But given the way young Ichigo was avoiding them, it must mean that they were sharp enough to cut. Jinrei was proud. The fight went on, and both opponents looked to be at a standstill. Suddenly Ichigo unleashed a deadly Sokatsui, Kido, causing Byakuya to shunpa away. He was still singed by it, though. Ichigo gave a small smirk. "It has been fun, Byakuya, you managed to make me unleash my Ryatsu," the Shiba heir congratulated, as if Byakuya hadn't noticed the pressure weighing him down. He gritted his teeth, knowing what was to come. "I think you have deserved to see my Shirkai," the prodigy said casually, causing muttering to erupt in the crowd. There were many fangirls there who wanted their hero being awesome. Little did they know they would pass out as soon as Ichigo released a hold of his Ryatsu, not even releasing his Shirkai. Incredible. He had so much Ryatsu sealed away. I thought he was lazy when it came to that, because of his already monstrous Ryatsu. This is easily equal to my Shirkai edging on Bankai. Yoruchi said. She was truly impressed by this man. Too bad he'd chosen the sixth. And judging by Jinriai's smug expression, the old fart knew as much. Having both the strongest Shinigami graduates in centuries enter high division must have been a blessing. Ichigo was probably on the verge of learning Bankai, meaning that Jinrei could go back to retirement. Yoruchi turned her attention back to the fight. Tear the heavens asunder, every conscious person in the room held their breaths. Zangetsu, a wave of pitch-black Ryatsu engulfed the arena, blinding everyone except the oldest captains. When they could see again, they saw an unconscious Kuchiki, and a victorious Shiba. Silence. Then Jinrei stood up and began to clap, and the rest of the captains followed. Ichigo bowed slightly, before resealing his Zanpakuto, making many sigh in relief. He then lifted Byakuya up, bringing him to Unohana, who blinked in surprise. The prodigy bowed again. Please heal him, Unohana Taicho. With that said he shunpoed, leaving Unohana stunned. Kaien snorted silently at the picture she presented. Retsu turned and glared, making the Shiba clan head yelp in fright. Yukitake shook his head at their antics. Jinrei smirked in satisfaction. Shiba Mansion, 2 days after graduation. After the graduation of Ichigo and Byakuya, the clans decided to celebrate that both their heir lords had graduated in record time. The Shibas, being the ones that had the stronger heir, had decided to celebrate the occasion with a graduation party in both Byakuya's and Ichigo's honor. Every Kuchiki and Shiba was invited to the party, which is why Byakuya and Ichigo were sitting with Kaien, Jinrei, Kakuto, and Isshin while the party went on around them. Isshin, Kakuto and Kaien were drinking from their sake cups, while Ichigo and Byakuya were enjoying some tea along with Jinrei. Surprisingly, Kaien didn't insist on Ichigo drinking, something about protecting his baby brother. Ichigo snorted in amusement. If only Kaien knew that his baby brother was a war veteran. Speaking of which, it seemed like this was the perfect opportunity to set his plans in motion. The Shiba heir turned towards Isshin. Isshin-san, he said in a hesitant tone, catching the attention of everyone present. Isshin sent Ichigo a curious look. What is it, Ichigo? Why do you seem so hesitant? The member of the royal guard asked. Ichigo fidgeted a bit, before he finally sighed, perplexing everyone assembled, especially Byakuya. Ichigo never fidgeted. Never. Could you please put up a barrier first, Kaien? I don't think it's suitable for everyone except you guys to hear. Kaien raised his eyebrows at Ichigo's strange request, but complied. Ichigo nodded in satisfaction when he felt that no one would hear them. I have some information that might be useful for you, Isshin-san. You see, I was wandering around Siratii a couple of days ago, when I heard some voices, and detected some foul Ryatsu. I admit, my curiosity got the best of me, and I hid my Ryatsu dash. Here Ichigo was interrupted by Kaien. Wait, you can hide your Ryatsu? I thought it was too much to control. Ichigo sent him an annoyed look. Yes, I can, because if I didn't have any control, I wouldn't be able to do any kind of Kido. I just don't do it cause it's too much hassle, and because it tricks any enemy to think that I have control. Can I continue? Hiding his Ryatsu to the fullest to make the point clear, Ichigo continued after Kaien nodded faintly. Good. As I was saying, I went closer to the voices. What I saw shocked me. There were two Shinigami in front of me, both Fukutecho, judging by the badge, who were observing a hollow. Eat a Shinigami. Ichigo paused. Letting it sink in. What? How? Wait, don't answer that. Who? The last question was asked by Jinrei, who had an unreadable look on his face. Ichigo looked uncomfortable, which was understandable. I didn't know who they were at the time, but I researched information about every Fukutecho in Siratii. The men were Aizen Susuk and Tosen Kaname. Silence enveloped the group. Kaien was stunned. Aizen? But he's so kind. And I don't know how that justice freak would have justified such and as feeding a Shinigami to a hollow. Kaien winced at the bad pun, but still looked at Ichigo disbelievingly. Ichigo rubbed his forehead. Look, I don't know these guys, so why would I accuse them of something they didn't do? Anyways, what I overheard was them going on about some buken and some way to combine hollow and Shinigami powers. Apparently the poor guy was a failed experiment, they had tried to hollowify. Believe what you want. Ichigo scowled and crossed his arms, watching the reactions through narrowed eyes. Finally Ishin answered. I believe that you are telling the truth, and if it's indeed as so, we are in big trouble. I will request an investigation as soon as I arrive in the royal realm. Ichigo nodded in acceptance. Kaien looked up from hands, which he'd been wringing since Ichigo expressed himself. I trust your judgment, Ichigo. I will tell Yukatake and Kuraku Taicho of this. They will probably help us in this investigation. Aizen and Tosen shall not go unpunished. Hearing that, Ichigo smiled, unknowingly blinding many a female attending the party. Jinrei added his own 2 yen. I believe in you as well, Ichigo-san. After all, what possible reason could you have for lying? Byakuya nodded at this, expressing his agreement, and Ichigo's smile dimmed just a fraction before turning back full force. If only they knew. After the party, Ichigo's chambers. Ichigo sighed in relief as he closed the door to his rather large room when the party finally ended. Apparently being at air automatically gave you a 100 by 100 room. At first he was uncomfortable living in such a big room, but he quickly adapted, as with all things he did. He was feeling a bit guilty for manipulating his friends in such a manner. But at the same time he was determined to erase Aizen in such fashion that killing him would seem like a good feat. Now that he'd fed his family and friends another bullshit story, he was sure it would happen sooner rather than later. He just wished he could tell them the truth instead of hiding behind carefully planned lies. Suddenly his thought process was cut off by an irate Shiro. Oh, shut up, King. Sometimes lying the best way out. And this will make life much easier if they knew that you killed Aizen with a reason, and not just out of jealousy of some sort. Small sacrifices, and all that, the Zanpakuto said irritably, fed up with his king's moping. Yawach chipped in. I agree with Shiro. But you must be ready for the repercussions Aizen's death may bring to the timeline. You might never be born, as Ishin wouldn't have to fight a hollow named White, and there may never be Arankars, except for Stark, as he is a natural one, and there might never be Vizards, except yourself. Not to mention the Quincy War, the old man stated, reminding Ichigo of the consequences. The orange-haired smiled wryly. I'm okay with that. After all, whenever did the consequences bother me, he answered, knowing that Yawach was right, and accepting what might become of the timeline. If Karen and Yuzu were never born, they could never die. Ichigo didn't want his sisters to be born in a war-torn world, where death was only the beginning of suffering. The small grunts from his inner world alerted him that Shiro and Yawatch agreed. Section 2 months later, Captain Meeting. The Soteicho of the Godai 13 looked over the assembled captains grimly. In order, they were Yoruchi Shihoin, Rose, Rujuro Odorobashi, Retsu Unahona, Hirako Shinji, Kuchiki Jinrei, Ikawa Love, Kyoraku Shunsui, Kensei Megurama, Kenpachi Zaraki, Kasuke Urahara, and one healthier-looking Yukitake Jushiro. Unfortunately, the 10th Division captain had just retired after a couple of centuries of service. Something about familial matters. But the Soteicho felt that spot would soon be filled by a certain orange-haired Shiba. Oh, Yamamoto knew of the Shiba, his Zanpakuto had told him a lot about the infant. To be so powerful that he managed to be a Fukuteicho at such a young age was almost unnatural. In fact, it was unnatural, but the Soteicho didn't doubt young Shiba's loyalty. The reason being that he'd reported such important news. News that may have sounded preposterous at first, but were just as true as the infant had said. Yamamoto remembered when his two most prized students had came to him for the first time informing him of Aizen Susuke's betrayal. Understandably he was disturbed and skeptical, but he'd never seen Shunsui so serious, and probably never see him like that ever again. So he'd ordered an investigation. And the discoveries were terrifying, as they were revolting. Using live Shinigami and infecting them with hollow Ryatsu. For the first time in millennia, the Soteicho shivered. What made it worse that Yamamoto had almost considered preparing Aizen as the future captain commander. His cool temperament would keep things in check, and his power could be cultivated to be stronger than that of Yamamoto, and his now revealed to be fake kindness would motivate everyone to be better Shinigamis, like Jushiro's kindness motivated the 13th Division. It was no secret in the Siratii that the white-haired captain's division was filled with the strongest, most loyal, and most creative Shinigami the Godai 13 boasted. But now, with this revelation, that plan was down the drain. Yamamoto shook his head, refocusing to the meeting, where he was met with concerned and alarmed gazes. Ah! It seemed he had spaced out, he thought with a wry smile. Then he sighed, and rubbed his forehead. I am getting too old for this, the strongest Shinigami of the Godai 13 muttered, alarming his subordinates further. Even Shunsui straightened up from his usual slouched seating pose. Yamamoto steeled himself. Captain of Godai, we have a traitor in our midst. A silent shush fell over the room, before disbelieving mutters spread over most of the captains' faces, though some reacted with solemn understanding. Namely Kuchiki Jinrei, Shunsui, Jushiro, and surprisingly, Retsu. Yamamoto held up a hand, silencing the room once again. 2 months ago, it was reported by the newly instated Fukuteicho of the 6th Squad Shiba Ichigo that he'd seen some of his fellow Fukuteichos doing something that is by all means considered treason. One Tosen Kaname, and one Aizen Susuke, had apparently been watching a Shinigami being eaten by a hollow. When Ichigo went nearer, he heard them talking about experiments which could breach the barrier between Shinigami and hollow. Gasps erupted in the room, before they were replaced with disgust and disbelief. Yamamoto observed them before silencing them again. I can understand your skepticism, a newly graduated 31-year-old making tales. Nevertheless, we had nothing to lose if we investigated the matter. Which we did. Yamamoto paused, letting it sink in. The captains waited with bated breaths. It seems like young Fukuteicho was correct in his observations. Our spy reported that Aizen does have his own laboratory where he brought several hollow and Shinigamis and experimented on both of the races. And that Tosen also accompanies him from time to time. The room had settled in silent shock, rather like Yamamoto had. The Soteicho decided to conclude his monologue. The C-46 have been reported to, and they have ordered the execution of Aizen Susuke and Tosen Kaname by the Tsukio as soon as they are cast. But we have to face Aizen Susuke together. We don't know if both he and Tosen have been hiding their strength to avoid attention. As we may be facing captain-level Shinigami, all captains present must work together to see to it that he doesn't escape. A solemn silence enveloped the room. Oh, and Jinrei, the Kuchiki clan head, snapped his head up, surprised at being addressed. Yamamoto smirked under his beard. Bring your Fukuteicho. After all, he was the one to discover the treason. Getting a nod in return, Yamamoto walked in the direction of the 5th Division barracks, with the rest of the captains following his lead. This was going to be interesting. Section 2 hours later. Ichigo looked around him grimly. 2 hours ago, the entire Godai 13's captains had cornered Aizen and Tosen, forcing him to reveal himself. As Ichigo had predicted, Tosen had fallen quickly at the hands of his Taicho, Ikawa Love. Apparently he'd been mad at not recognizing the traitor, an annoyed, justice, mentality. Ichigo winced. If there was anything Love hated, it was self-entitled idiots. Speaking of which, Aizen was smirking coldly. And he had reason to. The BSTRD has released his Shirkai and had tricked the captains to fight each other. Ichigo sighed irritably, preparing himself for acting. Stop! The Fukuteicho shouted at the top of his lungs, surprising every boy into stopping. Ichigo arranged his face into confusion. Why are you guys attacking each other? Aizen's there. Let's get him before he escapes. The captain all blinked, looking as confused as Ichigo portrayed himself to be. From the corner of his eyes, Ichigo could see Aizen frown before it was covered with his usual "I am so cool and evil bow to me" mask. Ah, it seems like you can see through my illusions, Shiba, the brown-haired man said in his usual "I am dash, okay you get it." Yamamoto frowned. Illusions? How is this possible? Your Zanpakuto is a water-based one, if I remember correctly, the old man demanded an answer. Aizen looked amused. Since you ask so nicely, I will deign to answer. You see, Kyuka Suijetsu is an illusion-based Zanpakuto. Its illusions are so strong that they cover all 5 of your senses. It is one of the reasons why you've never discovered my escapades in the last 2 centuries. I am quite curious as to how you managed to do that, but oh well. What I am more curious about, however, is how a boy like you can see through them. Care to explain, Shiba? Aizen turned towards Ichigo, who smirked. The captains all stepped back, including Yamamoto, sensing a battle that they obviously could not be a part of. After all, if all your senses were cut off, how could you battle someone you couldn't see, hear, smell, sense, and consequently touch? Ichigo seemed to be their last hope. Since you ask so sincerely, Ichigo mocked, making Aizen twitch. I don't know. Maybe because I am stronger than you. This time, Aizen sneered. I don't see how you could be stronger than me. You might be a prodigy child, but a child nonetheless. Ichigo snorted at the retort. Typical villains, all high and mighty. And as they say, how the mighty fall. Raising his Reiatsu to the max without releasing Shirkai, Ichigo smirked at Aizen's slightly widened eyes. Wanna bet, traitor? That was all the warning Aizen received before Ichigo was in him, slashing, stabbing, dodging at lightning speed, pushing him back. Caught totally by surprise, Aizen shunpoed away, creating distance to get some breathing space. It appeared as if he'd misjudged the child. A flicker of rage appeared in his eyes. Aizen Susuke did not misjudge. The kid was going down. Aizen prepared himself, flaring his Reiatsu easily dwarfing Ichigo's and many of the captain's Bankais as the traitor was in Shirkai. Ichigo knew what was coming, and prepared himself. It seems I underestimated you, child. But you can never equal me. Seeping crest of turbidity. Arrogant vessel of lunacy. Boil forth and deny. Grow numb and flicker. Disrupt sleep. Crawling queen of iron. Eternally self-destructing doll of mud. Unite. Repulse. Fill with soil and know your own powerlessness. Heido number 90, Kurohitsuji. A resounding "no" was heard as Ichigo was enveloped in a black box. It seemed as if Shiba Kyan had found about their little rendezvous. Kyan looked as if he wanted to crush Aizen in the most painful way possible, but was denied the opportunity by 3 captains who held him back. Well, that was it. Aizen's impending obligatory "I am an evil villain, hear me brag while you suffer" monologue was suddenly as Ichigo's Ryatsu skyrocketed within the black box. Kyan looked hopeful. Tear the heavens asunder, Zangetsu. As the black box exploded into tiny pieces, Ichigo appeared, holding 2 Zanpakuto. His Ryatsu was easily on par with Aizen. His hair fluttering in the air together with his slightly different Shihakusho, looking like the true definition of deadly beauty. Yoruchi was nursing a nosebleed. Ichigo smiled mockingly. Surprised? Again, that was all the warning Aizen had before Ichigo was suddenly in front of him, beside him, behind him. The brown-haired man felt as if he was fighting several foes at once. That was the nature of Shiba Ichigo's speed. Aizen was barely keeping up, and once again shunpoed away from his foe. The traitor felt a stinging sensation on the left side of his body. Impossible. The child had somehow managed to cut him. Aizen was truly angered now. Ichigo looked at the fuming breathing man a couple of meters away amusedly. You know, a man once told me that if you run away from your opponent, you're clearly the weaker one. Just surrender, Aizen, and you might die an easy death by the Tsukioko's power, the orange-haired man voiced, further irking Aizen. Well, that man was a fool. And I will never surrender. Witness the true vastness of my power. Bankai, Kyuka Suigetsu. Aizen's katana was suddenly replaced by a bigger one, and his wounds closed. His Ryatsu was now so high that it surpassed that of Yamamoto's Bankai. All the captains except Yamamoto, Shunsui, and Unohana kissed the ground. Ichigo sighed, as if bored. Very well then. No more playing. I shall let you sense a smidge of my true power as well. The prodigy smirked as he rose into the air. Aizen narrowed his eyes in skepticism. Don't joke, child, there is no way you ca bistro. He was cut off by Ichigo's rising Ryatsu. Aizen was shocked at how there could be someone who was as strong as himself. Bankai, Tensa Zangetsu, a calm voice intoned. An explosion of black Ryatsu enveloped the whole of Siratii. The Ryatsu rose to insufferable levels before I completely disappeared. Yamamoto's eyes widened. The child was a god. A true transcendent. The Suteicho almost pitted Aizen. Almost. As the black Ryatsu cleared, they saw Ichigo holding a pitch-black bow. Was that his Zanpakuto? Meanwhile Aizen was a little scared. He was a genius, and he could tell why the orange-haired man's Ryatsu had seemingly disappeared. He prepared himself to summon a hollow to open a garganta so he could escape. Ichigo watched his enemy and torturer looking for an escape. A strung-in arrow. He could only fire one of these at the height of his Shinigami powers. If he'd activated his Volstanding, he'd had an unlimited amount of arrows, but that was his Quincy powers. His arrow could however destroy souls. Which was why he'd used this particular Bankai form of Zangetsu. The orange-haired man thought of his sisters, his father, his friends, and let go of the arrow. Heilig File, he whispered quietly, so quietly only he heard it. Aizen had no time to react before the arrow pierced him. He screamed. Ichigo looked at the painful death of the murderer of his sisters. He'd avenged them. 200 years before they were born. He felt so tired. Suddenly he was embraced by his brother. Kyan. He hugged him back tentatively. Ichigo had never done well with physical contact, except in fights. He hesitantly patted Kyan's back, noticing he was taller than his older brother. Ha! He must have grown. Abruptly someone cleared their throat. Ichigo turned around. Suteichu, he bowed, though it wasn't one of a subordinate to a superior, but one from someone who respects another as an equal. Yamamoto pierced Ichigo with a soul-searing look, before he bowed back, surprising everyone. Shiba Ichigo, you have my gratitude and respect for what you did today, and for the warrior you are. Now, go rest, I have to explain to Central why there isn't a traitor to execute. With that, the formerly strongest Shinigami shunpoed away, leaving a perplexed audience. Captains and Kyan blinked several times before shrugging, and after congratulating Ichigo they too went away, excluding Kyan, Unohana, Yukitake and Kiraku. Ichigo looked at them in silent curiosity, wondering why they stayed. Ichigo-chan, you were holding back on me. Shunsui said airily. Ichigo snorted. Not any more than you did, drunk, he answered the easygoing man. Shunsui blinked in surprise, before laughing softly. You have a talent for pissing off people, kid. Be glad that I like you, the man drawled. Ichigo gave him a look. I am flattered, but I must decline, the orange-haired man answered in a flat tone, stunning the captains into silence. A few seconds went by, before Unohana and Yukitake's soft chuckles broke the silence. Kyan was cackling. Shunsui glared. Ichigo high-fived his brother. Maybe time traveling wasn't that bad. Suddenly Ichigo groaned, remembering the stack of paperwork waiting for him in his office. Forget that. Hell was wherever paperwork was. Little did he know that the paperwork was about to get worse. Captain's meeting, after the battle. Yamamoto Genryusai Shigekuni was staring at one Shiba Ichigo. As was the whole of Godiai 13's captains, though Shuansui's stare could be qualified as amused. Yamamoto knew that the Shiba heir had seemingly riled the easygoing captain, but he also knew that Shunsui had been acting angry to amuse himself. That man was truly exasperating. The Soteicho shifted his attention back to the subject of his confusion, wariness, amazement, and curiosity. Truth to be told, Yamamoto was wary of this young infant more than anything. He'd proven that he was clearly stronger than every Shinigami to ever walk, including Yamamoto himself. In fact, the Soteicho wouldn't be surprised if the Ryu didn't send a summon for this young man this instant. Noticing that the relentless staring was finally getting to the young man, Yamamoto tapped the floor with his stick to gather the attention of all present. Fukuteicho Shiba Ichigo, the power and courage you displayed today was truly impressive. If you would explain to us exactly why you were able to see through Aizen's illusions, and why you have such power, that would be insightful. Yamamoto asked the orange-haired prodigy. Ichigo blinked, and then rubbed his forehead in a tired motion. Ichigo was truly tired. He was still in Bankai, not having a chance to lower Ryatsu and sealing his Zanpakuto. He needed to be in controlled environment to lower his Ryatsu, as to not eviscerate some poor sod when he fell out of his semi-transcendent state. Defeating his lifelong enemy for one last time was, with the knowledge that he could never be resurrected, was a weight off his shoulders. But now thoughts about the consequences were plaguing his mind. The most prominent thought was of Karen and Yuzu. They were likely never going to be born. He'd sworn to protect them. And now he was the cause of them not even getting to be born. What kind of a big brother was he? In his mind, Shiro seemed to have enough. Get your motherfucking act together, King. They've been waiting for your answer for the past 5 minutes. Your sisters would want you to move on, and do what was better for the whole of the universes. I'm pretty sure Karen would want to smack you, and Yuzu would give you that disappointed look you hate. So, for them, answer the old man. His counterpart's words seemed to have an effect on Ichigo, kicking his butt into gear. The orange-haired man steeled himself and answered Yamamoto's query. Well, Soteicho-sama, I don't know how I could see through Aizen's illusions, but according to my Zanpakuto it is because Aizen didn't know me, and vice versa, before today. All of you have been subjugated to his illusions before today, and I have not, giving me an advantage. I don't know any more than that. About my power, well, I have always been like this. My Ryatsu has always been strong, and attracted Hollow's father trained me, but I surpassed him quickly, learning Shirkai when I was 15, I think. I have been striving towards Bankai ever since, and I got it last year. In fact, when Kaien found me, I had defeated my Zanpakuto, and fell unconscious because of the wounds. I have been perfecting my Bankai ever since. The reason I didn't tell anyone was because you guys seemed pretty amazed by my Shirkai, so I figured that Bankai would be overkill. The half-truths and lies fell out of Ichigo's mouth effortlessly, stunning everyone. Yamamoto was now scrutinizing Ichigo further, not entirely believing the orange-haired man. Ichigo got ready to answer more questions, but that seemed to be unrequired as Shiba Ishin suddenly appeared in the doorway. Even Yamamoto looked surprised. "Excuse me for interrupting this meeting, Sutecho, but the Ryu has ordered me to bring Shiba Ichigo to the palace." "Why, I can't say, but it is urgent," Ishin said in impassive tone, stunning all present, including Ichigo. Yamamoto sighed, and dismissed the meeting. "I want a word with you after you are back, Fukutecho Shiba." Meeting dismissed. Ichigo nodded, and moved towards Ishin, who grabbed his arm and opened a portal, or Senkaman, if you will, to the royal realm. The prodigy sighed. What to do now? Royal realm, meeting the Ryu. Ichigo hesitantly sipped the tea a servant had poured him a moment ago. The Ryu was different from last time, looking much healthier, and more importantly, alive and moving. In the old timeline, the king had become a statue because of the constant drain his powers were going through in the cause of holding the crumbling dimensions together. Last time Ichigo had seen the Ryu, he'd been consumed by Johobok. It was a relief to see the linchpin alive and kicking. Though it was slightly uncomfortable being stared at by the royal guard. For 3 hours. Constantly. Oh, well, it wasn't every day someone was summoned into the royal realm. The Ryu, who was sitting on his throne, looked totally unaffected by the tension in the room. As he'd done for the past hour. Ichigo's eye twitched. Ishin sent him a sympathetic look. Finally, the Ryu began to talk. Shiba Ichigo, Fukutecho of Division 6, heir lord of the Shiba clan, he said in a curious tone, looking thoughtful. Ichigo waited. The Ryu smirked, though it was unnoticeable. Or should we say, Kurosaki Ichigo, time travel extraordinaire. A slight widening of Ichigo's eyes was all the response he got. Ishin made a peculiar noise. The Ryu looked amused, though his expression changed to one of annoyance pretty fast. Do you know the headache you have caused me for the last year? There is a reason why time travel is strictly banned. Though Urahara Kisuke is to be blamed for this, you could at least have tried to keep a low profile, letting the events play by. But no, you just had to play the hero. Now the future is clouded even to me. Explain yourself, Kurosaki, the Soul King said in a commanding tone. Ichigo just looked at him with a dead look in his eyes, making everyone in the royal guard uncomfortable. Ishin was surprised to see that look in Ichigo's eyes. Normally, the orange-haired man's eyes were filled with all kinds of emotions. To see him like this was highly worrying for Ishin. In fact, Ishin himself was surprised at how worried he felt for this kid, who might have swindled himself to being an heir. Ichigo began to speak. If you that I am a time traveler, you must know of the circumstances I come from, Ryu-sama, the prodigy said in an impassive tone. Now, the Ryu looked slightly irritated. No, I don't know. I did know until a while ago, but the future now is totally impossible to see. What I know of your past is because I looked into your soul. I cannot see further than the fact that it was Urahara who sent you back. Any more than that is clouded. Why don't you tell us your story, Kurosaki Ichigo, the Ryu practically ordered. Ichigo looked genuinely surprised, before he began talking. The dead look was back in his eyes. Very well. I am Kurosaki Ichigo, son of the Quincy Kurosaki Masaki, and Kurosaki Ishin, now known as Shiba Ishin. Ichigo was cut off by Ishin making a choking noise, and then promptly fainting. Silence. The Ryu snorted, and told someone to wake him up. Once the poor man had regained consciousness, the Ryu motioned for Ichigo to continue. My father sacrificed his powers to be with my mother. I was born in 1995 AD, on the 15th of July. Being the son of two highly powerful beings made me able to see ghosts from a young age. When I was 15, I had high enough spiritual pressure to equal a vice captain. But I was unaware of it, as I didn't know anything about the spiritual world, so I had no knowledge of the Ryatsu I was spilling, and the hollows I was attracting. As Ichigo continued to explain about how he got his powers, how he lost them, and how he regained them, and how he fought the Quincy's and then about Aizen, Isshin became more and more sick and frustrated about his own role in those conflicts. Even though he'd only know Ichigo for some months, he'd always a protective instinct towards him. There was an old tale about spirits being able to recognize their loved ones even after death. Apparently the bond was ingrained in one's soul. Isshin thought that there was truth in that tale, and maybe that's why he was so eager to believe Ichigo. And maybe that's why every Shinigami was keen on trusting Ichigo. And the next thing I know is Kyan asking me all kinds of ridiculous questions. That's why I chose to change the timeline, and that's why I killed Aizen. To prevent him and Juhabak from destroying everything again. Ichigo finished his explanation, looking as impassive as ever. The Ryu was silent, before he smiled. Thank you, Kurosaki Ichigo. It seemed like your breaking of the cosmical laws was to preserve the universes. I would like to offer you a place within the Royal Guard, as I do to every Shiba that achieves Bankai. Do you accept? The Ryu asked with a knowing glint in his eyes. Ichigo smiled dryly. I am afraid I must decline, Ryu-sama. I must fulfill my mission first, and to do that, I have to remain in Soul Society for the next centuries. Maybe after that, the prodigy answered. The Ryu just smiled. Very well. But do accept this Haori as a token of my respect of your deeds, even if they technically never happened. Shiba Isshin, please escort him back to Soul Society. With that, the meeting was dismissed. Isshin approached Ichigo, who looked slightly guilty, and started to explain. I am sorry, but I couldn't tell any and dash. He was cut off as Isshin embraced him in a bear hug, squeezing him until he couldn't breathe. It's okay. Isshin said in a thick voice. Ichigo looked surprised. You mean, you're not mad? He asked hesitantly. Isshin answered immediately. Of course not. I understand why you all hide your past from everyone. But Ichigo, you have to decide if you're ever going to tell anyone. When will you tell Kyan? And more importantly, Byakuya? Isshin said in response. Ichigo blinked, and they gave a wry smile. Soon, I guess. Now open the Senkamen. Yamaji is waiting. Laughing at Ichigo's name for the strongest Shinigami to live, Isshin opened the Senkamen. Ichigo sighed. He did not look forward to tomorrow.